Good evening and welcome to the school committee meeting this evening, Monday, March 28th. This meeting is being recorded for LCTV. It's being aired live and being live streamed at longmeadow.org. And this meeting was also posted as required by open meeting law. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Long Meadow School Committee maintains educational policies that foster continuous improvement by challenging and supporting all children in a safe, caring, learning environment, enabling them to reach their highest potential and to become productive citizens. Through effective communication and positive relationships, the Long Meadow School Committee will make informed decisions in the best interest of the students, the schools, and the Long Meadow community. We do not have any school presentations this evening, nor do we have any correspondence. So I will open it up at this point for visitor comments. Any comments? Come on up, Mark.
Jim, you want some water? Want some water?
You go right on ahead. Just ignore Michael.
Good evening. I'm Mark Gold, Avondale Road, Long Meadow, and I am on the select board, as I think some of you know, and most of you know. I'm speaking here as an individual, but obviously there are implications from the select board. And I'm speaking based on the agenda item that you have, which is a review of the budget, the school committee budget. And I'm doing so only to point out a couple of things so that hopefully kind of set the basis of the discussion. My understanding is that your discussion will be to decide whether or not to, and if so, how to adjust the school committee budget to come into agreement with the budget that was approved by the select board to bring to town meeting for town voter approval. The numbers, as I understand it, are that the school committee requested in the prior budget a general fund revenue of $33,203,609, and the select board's budget that was approved to move forward to town meeting has general fund revenue to the school department of $33,078,609. That's a difference of $125,000. And so that's one of the issues that will be discussed in your consideration. The reason I'm speaking here, though, is I also want to make sure that we pointed out that also included in the budget that the select board is proposed to take to town meeting for voter approval is the inclusion of $100,000, as it says in the warrant, to transfer from available funds. That's our budget euphemism for free cash. And so those funds were included in there as a recognition that should the school committee continue with or implement a policy of free tuition or no tuition full-day kindergarten, that in fiscal year 2018, which is the year after the one we're talking about, there'd be approximately, or best our estimate, $100,000 additional revenue coming back to the town. And so that $100,000 of free cash is non-recurring revenue, but it's going to a non-recurring expense item. So again, I just wanted to make sure that, or state that my understanding of what the proposal before the school committee is. It's to consider whether to adjust the school committee budget, and if so, how to do that. The amount of difference right now is $125,000 in general revenue funding, but there's another $100,000 in free cash that to some degree was put into the budget based on the presumption that there'd be free full-day kindergarten. And so I wish you good luck in your deliberations this evening, and that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Any other visitor comments?
Hi, I'm Bill Mulderig, 3 Oxford Road, Long Meadow. I just wanted to take a minute to, first of all, thank the school committee, and we have members of the select board here as well. I know that there's been an intense amount of work done over the last month or so on the budget. I simply wanted to come and offer, I guess, citizens and a parental perspective on the proposed budget, and just encourage the school committee to keep the current budget that they have proposed to the select board in place and bring it to town meeting. Particularly, it seems like the one item that really has been discussed at length has been, the 4 teachers at Williams Middle School potentially being cut. And I would simply say that if you look at, was looking at the DESI website this today actually. If you look at the current 7th grade across the district, we're looking at about 220 students. If you look at the current 6th grade, we're looking at about 236 students. So 16 more students in the 6th grade than the 7th grade. This doesn't appear to be the time to be cutting teachers for next year's middle school at next year's middle school level. And I think this is a feeling that many people feel, or a sentiment that I think a lot of folks here in town have. And I think that it would be great to have that decided at town meeting by the town. So I would simply am here to encourage the school committee to make sure that we bring that amendment to the floor. I know historically, as a citizen here, that has been the approach the school committee's taken. I believe it was about 4 years ago. There was an override that was required for the music program, I believe. I don't know if it was an override or what it was, but we did have to go and vote on it. And I know many of us did go and support keeping the music program. And I simply would encourage you to let the town decide on those 4 teachers. I think, it's been talked about in various meetings over the last month, but having a effective student to teacher ratio that is below 27-1, I think is very important in our kids' education at a critical time at the middle school level. And I think where we see that enrollment going up next year from the 6th to the 7th grade, it would be quite a challenge to lose teachers at that grade. So simply wanted to take the opportunity to express that to the school committee. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I'll move to school committee comments. John, go ahead.
Okay, well, I think anyone who's been reading the local newspapers is realizing that we're in the middle of budget season. Those who've been paying a little bit closer attention know that this is an annual affair and goes to the heart of democracy. By the way, it's the Long Meadow News' coverage as well as our friends at the Reminder. And what they point out is that there was a small divide on the select board over the school budget. Mr. Alex Grant voted to increase the town's assessment of what a wise budget would be. And it was outvoted by his colleagues on the board 4-1. This board has gone on record in support of a budget for the schools that includes free all-day kindergarten, tries to maintain the quality of schools and education that we offer at the middle school, and we're not making any cuts that we can't point to some change in the demographics to support it. We're not trying to cut. And even with that as a general statement, we have a member of the board, Mr. Lakiusa, says, and I'm quoting from the Long Meadow News here, he said, "We did our best. I really don't think this board is trying to reduce the quality of education in this town." Well, yeah, I guess that's his opinion, but solipsists have opinions, and it has to be tested against reality. And the reality is, if you make a cut in the school budget, you're reducing services. And conversely, services are always reflected in dollars. We don't have people working here for the fun of it. There are some people who really enjoy their work, but they have to be paid. And we pay professional salaries for professional workers. So I'm hoping that we're going to stand by our earlier promise to the children of Long Meadow and to the parents of Long Meadow. And I want to just gently remind the committee that our first responsibility is to the students in our care. We are the voice for those who are not allowed to voice themselves, okay? So I hope we're going to carry this friendly debate forward, but aggressively stand by our conviction that the current budget offered by the Select Board is not adequate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Michael?
I'm going to save my relatively similar comments to John's for the budget discussion on the agenda, but I do want to offer my sincere congratulations to the Long Meadow High School girls basketball team. State champions, very, very exciting. So congrats to them. And that's basically all I got right now. And I stole your thunder on that.
All right. Moving forward to old business, as many have alluded to, we have the FY17 budget discussion, along with the Select Board's offer. I think, as Mr. Gold had stated, and for those who have been following the Select Board budget process, what the difference of the Select Board's voted upon budget and school committee's voted upon budget is at $125,000, and they are asking if we will continue to collaborate and compromise. So that is for our discussion this evening. The hope is that we can come to some type of collaboration, joint decisions, so that the warrants, when they are printed, which will be the end of this week, will have an amount that will be presented at town meeting to hopefully not cause as much confusion as if the numbers were changed on town floor, though that has happened in the past. It's not something new. So with that, I will open up for discussion about the budget. Go,
You know I have a list, so you go first.
Yeah, we all got a list. So the first thing I want to say, and I don't think it can be underscored, especially considering that Mr. Gold and Mr. Foster are in the audience tonight, is that the Select Board this year has been generous with us, more generous than they have in the past. I'm not sure that it makes up for the several years in which we've had to amend the budget on the floor of town meeting because we've been given zero and we settled for $300,000. We are at a point in our budget where we have actual policy initiatives similar to them that we need to accomplish, and we need to accomplish in the short term, especially as we run up against potential legislative requirements, as we run up against foundation budget formulas that may change, maybe not so much in our favor, as we run up against potential changes in charter school legislation and all of the other things that are coming down the pipeline in education. We're $125,000 apart, which is not a bad position to be in considering we've been a lot farther apart in the past. But I agree with John that we've purposefully laid out a set of priorities this year, and those priorities include funding full-day kindergarten so that no child has to pay tuition, and maintaining, not a new policy priority, but maintaining staffing at Williams Middle School, maintaining elementary music. We're at a point right now where we potentially are either $125,000 or $225,000 apart, depending on how you want to look at it. And if we are able to do everything we need to do, then I think we'll be in a much better position next year in terms of our sort of delivery of education. We may not be in a better position next year in terms of our finances, and that's a year-over-year reality that we face. I don't think that that is a reason to not continue to pursue the initiatives that we voted on and supported as a board. What I do think we have to do is look again to see, can we get closer together? If we have to go to the floor of town meeting and amend the budget, does it have to be $125,000, or can it be something else? Can it be something less? Where are there lines where we have an excess, even if it's $3,000? How do we cobble together some sort of reduction that additional reduction we can make to try to close this gap? But I don't think that those reductions should come at the cost of programs. They shouldn't come at the cost of our students. And I think that we have to continue to be able to prioritize what we've already made a priority this year, and that is our kindergarten, and that is keeping teachers where they're needed, and that's keeping, sort of our eyes on the child. And this is the year to do it. It's not going to be next year. We already know it's going to be a tough budget situation, and it's not going to get any less difficult. So we either do it now, and we fight for what we believe in, and I don't want to say that's a fight because, again, they've been generous with us, and that's important to remember. But generosity this year is not reflective of previous generosity. Like I said, we've had to catch up. And if we had been receiving the level of funding that we needed in the past, then we wouldn't be in a position where we're looking for this amount of money this year.
I think that's a really important thing to remember.
We've taken de facto cuts.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we're getting 0.86% increase.
And our
we're
budget
having-
increases at 2.5, 3%.
Right. So I feel like that's very important and isn't being said enough. So I feel like we need to bring that to the attention.
I mean, every time that our budget does not increase with the costs inside of it, in concert with the costs in our budget increasing, we're taking a cut. Whether or not we're getting additional monies from the general government is not the question. It's a de facto cut. And we've had to cut, and we've made sacrifices. I don't like to hear that we don't take our fair share. We've cut more in the last 6 years to be able to bridge gaps than we have in the last 15. And we can't continue to forget that fact, and I appreciate that you highlight that. We've taken de facto cuts. We've been in positions where we've had to go to town meeting, where we've had to get what we've needed to survive, to be able to keep the teachers in classrooms and keep class size low. This year, we're doing all of that again. We've got a lot smaller of a bridge to gap, and that's a really good thing in terms of where we've been in the past. It's not a great thing that we're continuing to have these conversations about what we need to do to deliver education, because when we talk about economic development in Long Meadow, we don't have a lot of options, but it is investing in our schools. That's what keeps people coming. That's what keeps our home values high. That's what keeps housing stock turning over in a good way. We can't continue to say that our priorities are not important. They are important. So I certainly don't want to see that at the expense of other departments. I appreciate the work that every single department puts into supporting our mission and our goals. We've got great partners with Chief Stankiewicz. We've got great partners in the fire department. We've got great partners in Parks and Rec and DPW. That's not lost on me, but we've got a responsibility to the 3,000 kids and the 400 professional staff that work in this building. I'm done now.
Doubtful, but
Done
I'll
for
take
right
it
now.
for right now. Michelle?
So I know Kim has a lot of direct
Sorry.
questions, so I'll just throw in that I echo John and Michael, but in terms of compromising, I hope it's been obvious that I don't want to not keep looking at our numbers. I just think the two things that were presented to us at the last meeting, which was reducing the tuition and to half, or cutting the teachers at Williams, not entirely, but making most of the cuts that were originally proposed. Those two things I'm not comfortable with. If there are other line items that we could work through, maybe it's pushing off textbooks for a year or two, or, something else. I know, but, throw some other ideas at me, and I would still like to whittle down at that 125 if we can. I know we already did. When we originally approved our budget, I think something was asked of us, I don't know, Janet, if it was between you and Stephen and Marie and Richard maybe, where we came through and we said we still want this much, but can you go look at your budget again? And we came up with, was it 102?
102.
So those weren't great cuts, but absolutely, I'm comfortable with that. So I hope maybe tonight we can come up with some other ideas that can help whittle that away. I think from my own perspective, I would rule out, I would not feel comfortable reducing the tuition because I don't think that makes sense, because then we wouldn't get the 100,000 back from the state. And I don't want the other things that were on the table, and in terms of the teachers at Williams, I still think that proposed cut was too much considering the enrollment that we have. And so anything else I'd like to consider, but.
Well, I agree. And that's kind of why I sent that 2 pages of questions to
Right.
Tom, because I feel like, so a little bit about this is that we as a school committee, we have a finance subcommittee, and we meet every other week. December, January, February, leading up to the time when we have to give our budget to the select board. Whereas we just saw the select board kind of go through their budget line by line. That is where we, at the finance subcommittee, kind of go through our budget line by line. Then we bring it to the school committee, and I know we looked at it once, then we looked at it a week later. The week difference, there were 102,000 in cuts. But I feel like at this point, I know we have the finance subcommittee always looking at it, but I feel like it would be nice if all of us sat here and kind of went through this, because sometimes 7 pairs of eyes is better than 3. I had some very direct questions on some of the line items. Watching some of the select board meetings on TV, being here in person at some of them, I know that there were 2 things that came up. I think Marie Angelides had recommended right off the bat, because towards the end when they were coming to the decision to have it be a $125,000 difference, was the parking fee. And I talked with Tom a little bit about that in our finance sub-meeting this past week. He said there's an estimate of about $40,000 in there. 40, okay. And he said that there is, the Department of Revenue has a rule that the fee can only be used for specific things. If it's a fee being charged for the parking in that parking lot, that has to be used to repair that parking lot or do any type of maintenance in that parking lot?
Yeah, expenses associated to the reason why you charge the fee. So you
Right.
charge a fee for parking, so expenses that can be charged towards that fee are related to the parking lot. Repairs, maintenance, lining.
So that's $48,000. So
48 or 40?
48, you said, about?
Yeah, we
Okay.
had a balance of 37 prior to '09. The committee then combined and created a transportation fee. Back in FY15, they were separated. We reduced the rate. We've collected about $5,500 each year, so we're up to about $48,000.
And so currently, the DPW kind of maintains that parking lot. Like, we don't do anything to that parking lot?
They plow it. They have it lined when it needs to, being brand new. There are no repairs that are needed for it, but they do come in line the crosswalks, crossing from the sidewalk over to the parking lot.
So my thought was, is there a way that we can transfer that over to the town? I know, you can explain to me what you were, my thought was $48,000. Can we transfer it over to the DPW department? And maybe they can give us a credit in another area that we can use in the general fund towards this 125.
Yeah, so we can't transfer the funds to them. We can allow expenses to be charged to our line item that the school committee could appropriate how much ever they would like to, up to the 48,000, that then the town, I guess, could reduce whatever lines they would charge those expenses to on their side. I think one of the things I mentioned was, I don't know how much they have in expenses associated to the parking lot. I don't know how much plowing, and you can't really know until it actually happens. This year, obviously, their costs were much lower than last year, so it's hard to say. I think we also talked about charging the cost of the electricity for the lights out there. Again, it's probably an allowable expense, but figuring out some methodology to determine the amount of kilowatts that are used by those lights compared to the overall building, we'd have to spend some time trying to come up with some reasonable methodology to that.
So transferring the money, talking with the town about this $48,000, not transferring, but allowing them to bill us and us saying, yes, we'll take the bill and we'll pay it out of this fund. Does that, I don't know, does that sound like a real thing or no? Something that's
I think it's an idea, it's a great idea, it's
something to throw on the table for this moment?
I think it's something to consider. I mean, I think we need to look at a number of things like that and see what we can come up with for our total number.
So the other thing Marie had asked about was school choice. If we would take a look at our school choice again. And I know that we don't have a whole lot left in school choice. And we typically...
When you say Marie
Angelides, I'm sorry. She just, I'm watching the meetings and that's what she said.
I just wanted to make sure you're going.
It was, let's see, so school choice, we have about 300,000 in right now?
Well, that's the estimated ending balance. We receive revenue on a monthly basis, and we have expenses that have been incurred and/or encumbered for the remainder of the year. So assuming we realize all those expenses, we don't appropriate money for any other expenses, I anticipate about 310 to 320.
But we're also about 110,000 short this year so far for FY16.
Yeah, the
plus-
projection from March 8th, last meeting, was that we have a general fund deficit. Again, I think I said I wasn't sounding the alarm bell
Right.
quite yet, but that we were monitoring that very closely.
And I know that Sue shared with us some things we'll probably see in a later time, some additional expenses that we are kind of in the negative
Potential.
in,
Yep.
potential. So to deplete that school choice fund by something, as much as 100,000 could be a significant loss for this year even. So, does that make sense?
Ruling
So
that
that's-
out as an
I want to
option.
just rule that out.
Yeah, I would also add, it's your one-time revenue sources for recurring expenses. So it's the same concept of using free cash, it's using school choice. It's not a sustainable model, similar to some of the other moves that were included in the 102,000 changes that were made to the budget earlier on in the process. We took fund balances from some of those accounts that aren't going to be there every year. We reduced utilities, our natural gas, by 50,000. Yes, we are trending lower in FY16. It's been a very mild winter. But we have an increase. We locked in on a rate that's about 25% more for the commodity, which is about 2/3 of our total cost for our natural gas purchase. So I can't say to you right now that 50,000 cut we made is going to be something we're going to realize in those utility lines next year. But again, I can't say that it's a sustainable line item at the level that it's budgeted for FY17.
And circuit breaker, we took 22,000 out of that.
Yep, and that basically wiped out the fund balance, at least what we're projecting the money to be.
And that was, so, let me go on.
So the 102 that we've made in cuts previously, I don't know what date that budget is, those are the equivalent of free cash because the majority of those were one-time funding sources.
Yeah, half of it was using fund balance money.
And half
The
of
other
it was
half
the
was the
utility.
utility cut. Correct.
Right. So just so that we're clear, the 102 cut that we made is one time for us. It's not,
Right.
we don't have a funding source for it for next year's budget.
Well, so, yeah, when I look at this 102 that we cut between our first budget meeting and our second budget meeting where we approved our budget on the 11th, I think it was, I think you guys met with the town manager, I think, to get, and he had some suggestions, and based on your conversation with him, you guys cut $50,000 from natural gas, 22 from circuit breaker, 20,000 in building rental, and 10,000 in the preschool fund.
I want to be clear on those last three lines. We didn't cut the budget.
Okay,
So
you
we
reduced.
transferred from the general fund those expenses to those special revenues.
Okay.
So we didn't take and say we're not going to have 52,000 worth of costs. We said instead of funding them out of the general fund, we're putting them to these other accounts that we budget in. And so they are using they're non-recurring revenues. They are the fund balance in those accounts.
Okay.
And
Similar to the parking fund.
Similar to the parking fund.
Okay. And so that leads me to some of these questions that I emailed earlier. So I noticed that we made some reductions in our natural gas lines at a lot of these, and I can look at, I guess, I'll go right to the high school. So when I was looking at these, I looked at the proposed FY17 for natural gas in the high school, which is on page 22.
Can I just ask what version you're using?
The one that we got on the February 11th.
Okay. Thank you. I know we've
Yeah,
gotten several
sorry.
versions, so I just wanted to clear up what we're using. And because this is also online, if anybody at home
Right.
is wishing to.
So I assume this is the most recent because it was the one we approved on the February 11th.
Yes.
So I look at the natural gas line for the high school, and I look back a few years because I feel like last year, FY16, was kind of a special occasion with all the coldness that we had. So we went 97,000 73,000 FY15, 97,000 FY16 to 65,000 FY17. So there's a $31,000 reduction, which seems pretty big to me. I know back in FY13 we were in a different building, so we were at 207,000. So we seem to have very much reduced our natural gas cost at the high school with this new building. So I wanted to point that out, that we went from 207,000 in FY13 to 86,000 FY14, 73,000 FY15, 16, I think, is that what we're budgeted for right now? Or what we're?
That is the amount we're budgeted, 63,000 or so.
Okay, and then FY17 is 65,000, so I wanted
Yep.
to, we made a reduction there as well. Supplies and equipment at the high school, we went up pretty significantly from FY16 to FY17 so I wanted to just ask for some, I really just want to find out
Yeah,
what we're doing
so-
with these.
To be clear, so if you look at all of the 6 schools under the supplies and materials and the
Yep.
other expense sections, so we allocate, we have about 400 or so thousand that we have for discretionary money. And what we do is we develop a per student allocation for elementary, for middle, and high school. So based on enrollment, they get an allocation, which is why you see Blueberry's going down, because they have less students than they did the previous year. And Center's going up because we moved students into that neighborhood. They was moved, and so the enrollment went up, so they're seeing an increase in the amount they're allocated. The principals can then allocate, based on the lines in those 2 sections, where they want the money to be budgeted. So the total amount is provided to them, then they make that decision through their school council and looking at what the needs will be from department chairs and consumables that they're going to need. So they submit those budgets to us based on the total amount they're appropriated.
So the total amount, when I look at, like, these are individual line items, so maybe we had an increase in supplies and equipment, but we also had an $11,000 decrease in office supplies. So the total I should look at is at the bottom where it says supplies, and we had a 0 increase.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, just wanted to, thank you for that one. So if I go to the front page, I just had a question on this doctor salary. You had mentioned it, I kind of asked you as we were leaving the meeting, $4,000 doctor. Do we have a doctor
Yes.
on staff?
2
Okay.
that I believe by law you're required to have. They each get paid $2,000. The nurses consult with them regarding policy issues, and I think, did they write the script for the?
They'll do some PD sometimes for
they do
us. They
some
do
special
scripts for the generic,
Narcan.
yeah.
So kind of
Narcan
consulting with a couple of doctors? Because I can't imagine, that's not a full-time.
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so then
How much was that?
it's 4,000. I mean, it's just, I'm just trying to find a little bit
Yep.
here and there. So in-state travel, what is in-state travel for other expenses? And
That is
Admin.
professional development, so that is cost to go to conferences, that is mileage for professional development, that might be hotel stay, school committee when they went to the joint MASC conference, the cost associated to attending that for hotel and reimbursement.
Okay. Let's see. And tuition, vocational?
So we have students, we are required to offer students an opportunity to participate in a vocational program. So being a member at the collaborative, they offer a number of different vocational opportunities. So we receive a charge based on the number of students that are enrolled in the programs. And we also, you see it does fluctuate from year to year, because if we have a student who is selecting a program that the collaborative does not offer, they have the opportunity to attend a vocational school that does offer their program. I know recently, I think we have one student in Westfield Voc this year, and I believe we've had a student up in Hampshire Vocational for an agricultural program. So we're required to pay for that vocational educational opportunity.
So this is not, like, this is a requirement from the state. We can't
Yes.
say.
We cannot
We can
say
cut
you
this.
cannot.
transportation on top.
And transportation on top. So, I mean, I'm just looking at it, I mean, it's gone from 262,000 to 150,000 to 186, so,
Yeah, it's really reflective of the
It's
number of
just-
kids enrolled in a vocational program.
okay. So then you just talked to the supplies and materials question that I had about instructional supplies. But I actually did want to pull this.
Are you
The
in
instructional supplies,
development section?
let's see, supplies and material. Yeah, instruction development, page 3.
Yep.
So we have this, it's gone from 5,000 to 0 to 40,000 to 0 to 12,000 each school this year, and that $12,000, that is the math curriculum that we chose this year. Did we know that that was going to have a $36,000
Yep.
reoccurring cost each year?
It's
And-
pretty typical for all the programs that we looked at to have the consumables as recurring
At least
costs.
that for the consumables.
Yeah.
Okay. And does it change? Is it going to go up? do you
It's got
think,
potential
year
to go
year?
up, but, hopefully it won't go up too much.
It's going to be enrollment driven also, though, based on the number of kids we need to buy the materials for. So,
Okay.
I mean, not that we see a large change in our elementary enrollment, but that most certainly will dictate.
So when we look at a new science program, will this $12,000, could this possibly go up on a yearly basis? Because I'm just wondering why, like, FY13 it was 5,000, FY14 it was 0, FY15 it was 40,000, FY16 it's 0, and now FY17 it's 12.
So it's a little different with the science curriculum, and they'll look at, there are like ways to cut back on that, kind of sharing kits, but there are recurring costs like live creatures, butterflies,
Yeah.
things like that, but they're nowhere near the $12,000 a year.
And if I can, the
Yeah.
FY15 amount that you see in those 3 lines is the actual purchase of the curriculum, the math curriculum that was purchased at the end of 15, which is why you don't see any money budgeted in 16,
The 40.
because those consumables were part of that initial purchase at the end of FY15.
Okay.
So, sorry, so the 12,000 is just like the workbooks that they.
The reoccurring, yeah.
So that 40,033 is higher because we were able to.
It was
use
all the
some FC.
manipulatives, all the teacher material, and the
Resource rooms,
consumables, the
yeah.
resource room. So, and then what you're seeing in 17 is basically going to be the annual recurring expense associated to that particular curriculum.
Okay. So that is not, we're not able to reduce anything there.
Actually, some of the teachers have agreed to not, there are a couple different consumables, and they've agreed to go down to 1. So we've cut back in certain grade levels. If the teacher felt like there wasn't a need, or they could photocopy what they needed to, or reproduce things, that would be less expensive. Not a lot of photocopies.
But it wouldn't
Or use an
reduce the
online.
quality of the service?
Nope,
Okay.
nope, because they're running through now for kind of most of them the second time.
Okay.
And they're
The only thing
realizing
it would mean is that they can't do the same unit at the same time. They'd have to share the kit, so it would limit their,
That's
Yeah.
science. Science would,
Science
for sure,
kits,
yeah. But math, they felt like some of the curriculum was repetitive for kindergartners especially, so.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's good that
Yeah.
they've used it, now they've seen
Yeah.
places we could
They're
maybe.
being mindful.
See, I feel like that should be noted, that even the teachers are trying.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay. There was pupil services and their professional salaries, the psychologist salary.
So, yeah, there are 2 employees here, and there are 2
Okay.
factors. One, if you're familiar with our salary schedule and you look at step 14 to 15, you will notice across all columns that step goes up by approximately $5,000. So one of those individuals is
One of
next
them.
year going to be moving. They're currently on 14, so next year they'll get the bump moving to 15. We also have one who is receiving, we call it salary advancement credit, or they're moving laterally, so they're moving across a column. So they'll get the benefit of moving up to the higher educational column, plus their step, plus the COLA.
So those are contractual.
Those are contractual expenses, correct?
And then the sped
Yes, that
administrator.
is the Director of Pupil Services line.
So that actually could change because we haven't set a salary for that.
Yeah, I would concur. So back on the front page, we have another admin salaries line, and that line went up $20,000 because what we do is we budget their funds that then get transferred. So we have two issues. One is that position, but also we are negotiating a contract for the nurses. So we have money there
So that's
for
like-
those two issues from a collective bargaining perspective that are not on the individual employee salary lines.
Okay. Kind of like the 200 and something that's like. what
Yeah,
you're
that
holding
type
aside
of, yeah,
For their contracts to be.
the exact same approach.
Okay. Okay. Evaluation expense under contractual services, pupil services.
Yeah, so Sue can jump in and help at some point, but so
'Cause
you
that-
can see that there was a big drop in the FY 16 budget by approximately 120,000, I think, from the previous year. And when the previous director was developing FY 16's budget, there was a goal of reducing outside consultants and using internal staff for a couple of areas, speech and language being one, and evaluations being another. With the number of kids we have and the services that were required, we weren't able to reduce the consultants that we use for these services. So you're seeing the increase back now in FY 17's budget, basically back to the exact amount of what was used in FY 15.
Oh, it's 20,000 less.
Yeah, so, well, we're not done yet for this year, so,
Okay.
but based on what we're tracking at, you know, we're right about the previous year expenditures amount, so that 130,000 increase that we're proposing was to maintain the services, unfortunately, that we use with outside consultant. And again, those are services to students that are listed in an educational plan.
So we legally are obligated to provide these.
Yes.
So just to clarify,
Yep.
you tried to save money here by hiring somebody in-house.
Yeah.
You couldn't, so that,
Didn't work
Well,
out.
we didn't, to my knowledge, we didn't try to. So this was, in some way, shape, or form, I think the department was hoping to be able to cover all the students with their current caseload, although you did increase some
Speech
speech staff.
language assistants.
Yeah, speech language assistants. And then when the scheduling came out and kids were lined up for speech services, I believe that the PS director realized that he could not cover with
Okay.
the services and needed to retain the consultation services.
okay.
And the same story for the psychology line, too, assessments. Yeah.
So then when I go down to the tuition, out of state, in-state, and LPVEC, those are all, because those are kind of where we've seen some of the bigger increases in this budget. Those are just because of services that students in our district.
Because when we build the budget, we build it on what we know.
Yep.
And then we have all those months between what we think we know and what we really know. And kids move in and move out, and that's what happens with your tuition lines. That's why they're so fluid and,
Yep.
you know,
Just like kindergarten.
yeah, one placement can cost $250,000, literally, including transportation, and that we haven't planned for. And we try not to have that, but if somebody moves in from out of state in that kind of situation. So those are huge, that's a big example, but you can see why it's.
It can happen.
Up and down. It can happen,
Right.
and it does happen.
And that's why, I mean, like our out-of-state tuition has gone from 1 million to 850 to 730 to 745, and now FY 16 or 17, right now it's proposed at 787. But
Yep,
just
so
based on
We have some kids
enrollment.
graduating and aging out of the programs out of state, and we try to place in-state first, so.
And so that's not a place that we can really afford to reduce.
We continually try to stay
Okay.
fiscally on it, but.
So the FY 16 IDEA equipment, supplies and materials under pupil services.
Let me keep going.
Sure.
Okay, so that is IEP software, and that's a new line for the IDEA grant. The state is telling us, or the feds are telling us, that we needed to create that line for equipment for our IEP software. And
So we have a new software that we are implementing now and is going into effect for July 1. And the cost has increased over the current software, which is no longer available after June 30th. So that's why you're seeing the increase from 9,400 to 11,000 and change.
Is this what Nick presented to us in his
Called
presentation last meeting?
TyNet, I think, is the name of the software.
yeah.
This is the one that gives more real-time and across-the-board.
This is the one that integrates with our Power School SAS.
Yes,
So it
okay.
allows us to go paperless in some ways. Better presents information to people.
Save some costs on paper.
Essentially, it's very
So-
Supplies and
We're
materials.
required really to have a lot of paper copies of things, but unfortunately, so.
And then other expenses, just looking, let's see, bus monitor.
Yeah, so the bus monitor is a expense we incur that we pay to the collaborative, who is our transportation service provider. So for bus routes that require use of a monitor, that's where we get charged and budget for. So we average approximately 7,500 to 8,000 a month, and then we have summer transportation also. So we've been running anywhere between 90 to 100,000 for that cost.
Michael?
Yeah, it hasn't changed, it doesn't
I
look
just-
like.
Can I follow up on that real quick?
Bill that.
I can't remember, I know we talked about this last year, but we talked about leaving the transportation part of the collaborative and going out to bid for our own buses last year when we were doing the transportation survey, right? Was it any cheaper?
Based on looking at surrounding communities, the average cost per day is in the ballpark. I mean, it fluctuates again depending upon the size of the community, but for those that we have data for, the collaborative is pretty
Around par.
close. Yeah.
What is, East Long Meadow does their own transportation?
East Long Meadow operates it in-house, so the employees are...
Okay, so they own their own buses.
Yeah, they own their own buses, and they're employees of the district.
Okay. Sorry, Kim.
No, that's fine. Jump in. So then that would explain the FY16 IDEA software under this one as well?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the actual total for the IDEA grant, I mean, the total amount that we appropriated in 17 is basically the amount we had in 16, I think, by about $300 and something. So we didn't really increase or decrease the total grant. We just moved money around based on needs that we see coming up.
Change the lines around, it looks like,
Yeah,
yep.
so we would have reduced the supply line, but then increased the software line.
So is any of this reimbursable by the state?
Well, it's a grant, so it's money that we receive from the federal government. It's an entitlement grant that we receive every year. We don't know what the amount will be until sometime in usually mid to late summer
Yeah.
or so.
Yep.
What is it typically?
It's typically been going up a little bit every year, but it's been around 712,000 or so. And I think we have budgeted 721,882 in FY17, and we have an award of 721,512 in FY16. So we increased it by $370. So.
And we usually decrease it.
And just the previous year, we had in FY15 an award of 703,900. So there's been, over the last 3 years, an increase every year.
Okay. And then the school technology questions, let's see. Computer hardware, it just seems like this line item is 14,000 lower. So I want to make sure we're not decreasing some services, higher, sorry.
Yeah, so, and Nick is here, but I will start.
Sorry, it's
So
higher. I wrote the wrong thing here.
we have a 5-year lease for a portion of our hardware that is expiring in FY17. FY17 is the final year. The annual payments are $101,000, which is the exact amount that was budgeted in FY16. I can tell you that that line has already exceeded that appropriation by about 20,000. So knowing that, and if you look historically back at how much we've spent, although in FY15, if you recall, we had a credit from the collaborative. We used about 173,000 to buy some technology.
Okay.
So that's why you see such a large expenditure amount over the previous 2 years. But looking at it and talking with Nick and looking at what we spend, leaving that line with absolutely no room to purchase any equipment, and it's just not computer hardware, and Nick can fill you in more, but you're talking the smart board, you're talking about networking equipment, you're talking about projectors throughout the district, that we would have no funds available to replace something if it breaks and needs to be replaced. And Nick, I don't know if you have more you can add.
No, that's pretty much it for the computer hardware line. It's a $101,000 payment. The final payment for the 5-year lease that we have to own from Apple comes up this September.
Well, because when I'm looking at the budget, I'm looking not just from FY16 to 17, but I'm looking back the 5 years. So it does look like we've decreased our spending from FY13. We were at 211. Then FY14 we were at 207,000. The FY15 we had that large. It was 362, but you said
173, yeah.
So that puts us literally right around 200. And then FY16, we go 100,000 less to 101, which you're saying is trending a little higher than that right now. And so now we're budgeting for FY17, 115. So I'm wondering if that is the right amount for that line. Not that I want to increase our budget anywhere, but I just want to make sure we're...
Well, my recollection, looking back at 13 and 14, I think there was some networking equipment, some servers that are pretty expensive that we had to address. And since we had the money, we felt it was a smart investment at the time, trying to be proactive before we run into a problem with our network, so that we made expenditures based on having funds available and accelerated that plan. So hopefully our network is safe. I know Nick applied for a grant that would allow us some redundancy with East Long Meadow if we're fortunate to be awarded it, but which would also then allow us to not have to worry about adding additional equipment here. So do I think that number is appropriate? I'm sure we could spend that and then some. We most certainly will do our best to prioritize what needs to be replaced and try to maintain that 115,000, but
that's a maintaining number. That's not any new services, no new programs. No.
Didn't we cut the technology line?
We did.
How much did we cut from
Actually,
that?
at the following
10,000.
We cut 10,000, an additional 10,000.
And what was that going to be?
We were taking that from the repair and maintenance line.
Okay.
So one of the ideas we had for reducing costs in that area was to hold staff more accountable for some of the repair costs for equipment that they have, laptops that may get damaged that require repair.
So it's a total of 10 that we cut from the original? Okay.
Where are we in looking at a new lease or that? I know that you're working on that. I don't know if that's...
We've met with representatives from Apple. We've been bringing it up in technology committee meetings. We've done a really thorough overhaul of our inventory to make sure we understand where equipment is currently allocated. We've met with technology teachers in the schools to see what their assessment is on what technology is the most effectively used in the buildings, what gets the most usage and they don't have enough of, what maybe doesn't get used as often, to prioritize that. So we have identified certain areas that we want to prioritize our spending. So for example, we kind of decided that the iPads that were previously issued to staff along with laptops aren't being used as extensively, and so we would not be looking at replacing those iPads. We'd just be looking at refreshing staff laptops. We've also identified that Chromebooks are highly applicable throughout the district and come in at a lower cost per unit than things like MacBook laptops. So those might be areas where we'll be putting more of our money going forward. But we'll be, like I said, the last payment on the current lease is in September, and availability of equipment can change at that point. There might be new models of equipment out there at different price points, so we don't know exactly what we'll be doing for a new lease arrangement, but we have identified what we think are the priorities and the needs in the district.
And that'll work in with the numbers that, I'm sure you've been working with Tom to make sure the numbers will be matching the priorities in the lease versus what's budgeted.
Yeah. Well, the reality, for example, of $115,000 is that we wouldn't be buying new iPads as part of that lease, that we would let that equipment age out rather than replacing it. So that's an example of one of the areas where we are kind of pulling back a technology deployment in order to better respond to budgetary reality.
Well,
there'd
if I
be
could,
nothing new.
I'm sorry, there would also wouldn't be till an FY18 expenditure for a new lease. So we would have to ride out from September through June with the current equipment because we don't have the funds to enter into a new lease until FY18. So 101 of this line will already go towards year 5's payment of the lease. So it would be FY18 before.
When will we actually be open to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at entering into a new lease and refreshing equipment for, say, the September of 2017.
So we have this new technology infrastructure, and we're going to have not new.
No, the equipment that we're talking about is only 5 years old. So, at that point, we have to make a decision. I know, 5 years in
I know what
technology
it's
is
like
old, but, when you have limited resources, and that's the more technology we add, the more cost we're going to incur on a regular basis. And so that I know his work as part of the tech committee is looking at that, and the more you expand your technology use, the more people, staff want it. It's hard to keep up with the most recent equipment that's available.
And so I'm sure you're also taking into account the BYOD programs to help offset some of this.
Right, and at the middle school, we're going to expand it to the 8th grade in the middle school this year, so we'll be looking forward to hearing back on the results of that implementation. From what I've heard so far, it's been successful. But I think the original intention of that was to supplement available equipment, not to replace it, because it is different than having a device in the classroom that you can rely on versus a student coming in where you have a diverse, classroom of many different devices and different skill sets and whether they're all appropriate for the task at hand. So we definitely will be taking that into consideration, but I don't see it significantly offsetting all of the equipment that we have out in the classrooms already.
So then I'm going to move down to custodial supplies.
I didn't want to do the software,
No.
computer software.
Well, we increased it 6,000, I guess, yeah, the tech computer software, we had an increase over the last 5 years. And this seems to be the smallest increase from FY16 to FY17. I'm trying to make sure we're not cutting services here.
It's
Because it feels like when I see these small reductions or additions that we could be.
It's tight. It reflects that we're not looking to add any significant services, and we're simply looking at maintaining our current level of service. So, for example, on the software budget lines, on the school side, that includes 29 different applications that we support, and not just applications, but also software maintenance agreements. So I don't know how much detail you have in the budget lines, but I pulled out some of the largest ones just so I could give you an idea of what that contains. One of them, for example, is Power School. That's our student information system. We received notice that the licensing cost for that would go up $5,000 per year the next time we go to renew this July 1st. So that brings it up to $25,000.
So that $5,000 increase next year, and we're only increasing the tech department, that line item, $6,400.
Well, that's
So-
the highest increase that we found.
Okay.
I reached out to our vendors to ask what we were expecting for renewable costs, and that was the one that had the largest increase. Go ahead.
Just to kind of jump on that, since our license is expiring, have we looked at other similar types of software that?
In the case of Power School?
Yeah.
Not specifically in the case of Power School.
Okay.
The issue with Power School is that it is your student information system, so it's deeply embedded in everything you do. So there is a significant cost to changing it.
Okay.
From implementation to staff and user training, it touches almost everything we do. Community outreach with our alert system, our attendance, our automated attendance calls, our grade system, our parent portal.
A new IEP program.
Our new IEP program.
So everything's.
It's deeply embedded into everything we do. So I don't think, that's one of the reasons why it's expensive to change, but to be honest, I don't think there would be substantial savings looking at alternative products anyway.
Yeah, I was just going to say, from personal experience, the other systems that we've used in where I work are terrible compared to Power School. So.
It's a very powerful platform. It's generally considered one of the best choices in student information systems. But there is a huge cost to changing, not to mention lost productivity just from people being unfamiliar with it, and with a huge undertaking that would be to migrate. Some of the other products that we have under that line, we have a device management platform. I wrote the numbers down here. We have about 1,200 laptops and desktops on the school side, 680 iPads, 604 Chromebook devices for about 2,400 devices. So we have a device management platform for $18,000 that allows us to manage them remotely, do things like tracking of lost or stolen devices, securely erasing devices that would be lost or stolen, pushing out applications and updates, that kind of thing. Our Microsoft licensing is $16,000 of that budget line. Our school messaging system is $12,000. Maintenance for our wireless network of 311 access points is $10,000. And then there's things that aren't necessarily tech related specifically, but we have like ASOP, our system for managing absences and substitute management for $7,500. Ames Web is a student assessment system at $12,000. Our firewall system that we use for web filtering, which we are required to use for SIPA compliance so that we get reimbursement and E-rate for our internet connection, that's $15,000 a year. TeachPoint for teacher assessment is $9,000. So there are a lot of things in there that would be difficult or impossible to get rid of without substantial impact that individually make up a large portion of that budget line.
I go into the wrong career if you're getting 25 grand for software.
It's not too late to change.
It's not too late.
You're very young, you can do whatever you want.
Okay.
Thank you, Nick.
Would you be able to answer I didn't include this in my original question, but now that I'm looking at this software line for the tech, when I go to town technology, the same computer software for the town side went up $6,000 as well.
Yes. The town side is a similar deal, but there are 9 applications listed under that budget line. The single largest one is Munis, which is our financial system. It's used on both the school and town side, but it's budgeted on the town side. FY16, that was $60,000. That was increased. There was an increase in that cost, but I don't know the exact amount. But that's $60,000 for Munis, our financial system. We have $10,000 for Cartograph, which is a geographic information system that they use. We have things for like the Civic Plus website hosting on the town side at $8,500. So that increase is to accommodate the increase that we anticipate in some of those licensing costs, but does not reflect the addition of any new programs or applications.
Because their budget, because I'm looking at all 5 years, had gone from 110 to 103 for this year, and it's going back up to 110. So clearly they needed the money too for that. And then those computer hardware on the town side, the $2,500, is that?
That's really tight. $2,500. It gets used up. I need to check to see where we are for this year, but so for example, I just met with the DPW about a week ago. They have for a couple machines that they use for AutoCAD for architectural drawings and engineering. That they're using like 6-year-old laptops that are completely inadequate for what they're doing. That $2,500 will easily be gobbled up next year with that kind of thing. I think in the past it's been used incidentally for things like replacing a printer that's located in an area or a projector that's failed in a conference room. So it's pretty tight.
So who sets that amount? Because I mean, if we're using a six-year-old computer in the DPW, and it feels like they might need.
Yeah, they brought it to my attention because it was an obvious need, but that was only recently that I found out about that shortcoming. So, I mean, we set that amount. It's been, I think it was because a few years back there was maybe 20, let's see, I just lost it.
Yeah, it was 20,000 in FY15.
I think there was a pretty substantial rollout of equipment at that time, and what we anticipated that would fulfill our needs for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
And what we're running into now is just small incidental stuff, kind of isolated pockets where there's special needs that aren't met by kind of the basic platform that we deployed at that point.
Now, would the town manager tell us if he sees this line item and say, hey, we need more than this? Like, I don't know how that works.
The department head should
Yeah, I think so.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're not underfunding certain line items that we're going to have to increase next year.
Right.
Okay, so now I'll go down to custodial supplies.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.
Unless you can speak to those too.
No, it's not very effectively.
Thank you, Nick.
Well, so when I look at custodial supplies, we were consistently 60, 61, 62, and now for FY17 proposed is a $20,000 decrease. That worries me.
Well, yes, and if you look at the next line, though, it's the $20,000 that we added, and the only difference, it doesn't carry it out to that differential column.
Okay.
But that is the offset to the line above it. When
Okay.
we made that $102,000 that I was talking about earlier, So that is one of the lines where we use 20,000 out of our building rental fund balance to pay for some of the regular, annual expenses that are pretty consistent around 65,000. So I would expect that that 20,000 will now have to next, in FY18's budget, be moved back up into the general fund custodial supply line.
So FY18, that will probably go up into the 60,000 range
Correct.
again.
Yep.
So that 20,000 that we're seeing in the next line item, it says FY17 building rental custodial. Is that part of the 20,000 that was
Yes.
asked for us to reduce?
Yes.
Or take from one and move to another?
Yep.
Okay.
So that's the one-time expense.
Yep, that is the building rental line
That, okay.
that was talked about back in February.
All right, I just want to make sure we're not going to not maintain the buildings.
Mhm.
So I assume when I'm looking at the Blueberry Center and Wolf Swamp, there's the kindergarten teacher, large increase, and then there's instructional assistant kindergarten line item. I assume those increases are the amount that they are because we're going from 161 to 243, say at Blueberry. That's because we don't have a tuition to cover those expenses, and that is,
Yeah, that would be correct, that the amounts that were budgeted from the tuition that was collected and charged in previous years would now show a zero and a large deficit in the difference column, and a large increase in the general fund for both the kindergarten classroom teacher and the aide, as you indicated.
is that the line item FY16 private K teacher?
Correct.
So we're down 79,000 because that was paid for by tuition?
Correct.
Okay. I thought that's what it was, I just wanted to make sure. Decrease, let's see, so you noted, so when I'm looking through here, there was a decrease in computer software, library books and supplies at Blueberry Hill, but it looks like they were fund more previous years. That's because you did it by student. You gave the school a price per student for that type of a fee.
Yeah, so you would see that their total allocation for their discretionary is going down by approximately $8,000. And
Yep.
again, that would be driven by the enrollment and the per student amount that was determined for FY17.
Okay.
And so then the Principal Pratt would have indicated where she wanted to assess those funds.
Because we reduced the number of students at the school, they have a $6,500 decrease in those types of
Yes, correct.
supplies. And then when we look at center school, they had a $6,900 increase.
Correct.
All right. So, let's see, center school professional salaries, there's a fourth grade. Most of the increases seem pretty true to contractual, like salary increases, but this one seemed to go up 37,000.
Yeah, so if you look at grade 2 and grade 4, even grade 5, there's a large reduction in
Yep.
grade 2, but then there's a large increase for grades 4 and 5. And what this is based on anticipated movement with staff next year, so trying to
Okay.
anticipate where staff would be assigned and the
Because of
salary
enrollment.
they have going with them in terms of FY17's assignment.
So that's just because of enrollment is changing at the
Yeah, and it's more the staffing and who's going to be in which
Teaching
grade
which grade.
next year.
Okay. We didn't add a teacher.
We did not, and because the cohorts, as they move up, we need to move sections up, which means it then impacts where staffing is assigned, and that's why you're seeing, as you say, because of the enrollment shift by grade,
Right.
moving up, the teachers have to move, or a teacher.
Right.
But we did not increase the number of positions at center.
And so that 109,000 on the bottom, the FY private K teacher, that's the lack of tuition.
Correct.
Again.
Yep.
Okay. So then the Wolf Swamp, FY16 Title I tutor salary, it's increased from let's see. Yeah, the tutor salary went up 9,000, 9,700. Is that because of students' needs? Like, what is a FY16 Title I tutor salary?
So yeah, we receive an allocation, again, a grant from the federal government.
Okay.
And you can see that line has substantially increased from 15 to 16.
Yep.
And
Well.
because we increased the number of FTEs based on the increased grant award amount that we have. So two buildings qualify for, to receive funds, that's Wolf Swamp and Glenbrook, and they both receive an allocation. The 9,700 you're seeing is associated to contractual increases based on assuming we receive the same allocation that we had in FY16, that we have the same staffing returning, that we have one individual who would be moving on the unit. The specialist contract has a different structure, so they have lanes basically that you're in for 5 years. And then when you move, the increase is percentage-wise larger than normal. And so we have one staff that is moving up, which is a portion of that increase.
Okay.
The rest would be contractual.
All right. And the instructional, okay. So then the Title I supplies instructional, there was a large increase there.
So the grant got a substantial increase, and Nicole and Neil Dial are the two recipients of the grant. They're two schools, so
Okay.
we sit at the start of the school year, or actually prior to that, and determine the ways that we can best service those students. And we needed some supplies, especially in the area of literacy, because we hired some additional tutoring folks to come on and address those kids in literacy and in math, both actually. It's a targeted grant, so we can only target certain students that qualify. But
So it's
so it might be a big
reimbursable
amount of
part
money,
of
but we
it?
can't spread it out over a lot of students. So
Okay. And so then I noticed our natural gas line, when I go back to Blueberry for a second, I noticed it was estimating close to FY14.
Yeah, so again, when we went through and made that reduction back in early February, the elementary schools each had a reduction of $7,700. We actually initially were increasing the Wolf Swamp natural gas by $6,000, but then turned around and put the reduction in to cut the budget by $50,000.
Right.
So that was proportionately basically spread out amongst all 6 schools.
Okay.
So you're
'Cause-
right, it is basically reflecting what we spent in FY14 at
Yeah.
a lot of the buildings.
Well, yeah, so I guess my question is if that's realistic.
Well, let's pray for a very warm winter again.
Because I'm just looking, when I look at FY16 revised, when it says 63,000, and we're budgeting 56,000, and FY15 was 53,000, just for center school, it just feels.
it's the year of the sweater.
Everyone put a sweater on? We're gonna. All right, I just trying to look at all the lines.
Those are concerns of yours too, right?
Yeah,
So
Kim,
then
I would agree. It's a
Yeah.
concern I have, but,
It
you
is a
know,
concern.
it was a decision we made to try to adjust our budget, looking at FY16's consumption. And again, we can't roll that number over because the balance is going to be needed because it's part of our deficit as of right now, any unused utility money. So, you know, I'm hopeful that we're fortunate.
So that amount, because I've got it noted in here at Glenbrook and at the high school and everything, all the schools. And so you're telling me this 50,000 that we reduced back on February 11th, the 50,000 natural gas reduction, the town agrees to support any deficits based on your conversation? So I shouldn't worry about that right now? But we should
Yes.
just note that it was reduced
Yes.
here. Okay.
So if we had a cold winter,
Yes,
we'd discuss that?
yes.
Okay.
Okay, and so the Glenbrook professional salaries, there was an increase in 4 teachers' line items, the English, math, social studies, and science, and I assume that's because this includes the 4 that we're splitting with Williams, and they don't currently have it this year?
Correct. So
Okay.
you are in those 4 areas. A .5 teacher was added to Glenbrook and reduced from the Williams budget. Back after the initial presentation and conversation about the middle school team, it was determined that it would be a shared team. So the budget includes that team being a split at .5 in each building. So you see a
Right.
reduction in Williams, but the
Yeah.
increase in Glenbrook.
I saw it on the Williams line items, there was the reduction and the increase at Glenbrook, so, okay, so then the natural gas, FY15 Title I, Glenbrook instructional supplies, it goes from 10,000 to 0 to 3,900. Is that another?
Well, yeah, and I can speak to that because we just, the school committee approved a transfer actually at your last meeting, moving some money into that line for FY16. I want to say $7,500, but I don't know for a fact what the exact amount was, but that was my recollection.
And now, are those part of a grant?
That is part of the Title I grant, so all of that money, that revenue is received as part of the entitlement, that grant that we received.
Okay. And then you answered the in-state travel, just the in-state travel line under other expenses for each of the schools, that's the professional development for the teachers?
Yeah, staff, mileage reimbursement, conference registration, hotel.
Okay, and then, let's see. High school professional salaries, let's see. Did I ask that yet? The
Metro?
Well, that's the natural gas line. Not on my original, but I did email you separately, the stipends for the athletic coaches. We've kind of talked about it a little bit in our finance sub. I know when I first joined finance sub last year, there was a large amount of money that we had to move from one fund to another to cover this. And I'm just noticing it was FY15, it was 140,000. FY16, it was 75,000, and we're estimating 75,000 for FY17. And I know it fluctuates based on if teams go to postseason
Yep.
play and stuff like that. Are we, I guess I wanted to ask, currently FY16, are we trending around the 75,000, do you know?
I don't
didn't-
think it's quite as high, although I did just receive notice that we're going to have some expenses for transportation for spring, approximately, at least now, about $8,000 because of a need for second and third buses to transport students to athletic events that Collaborative is unable to assist us with because of the time that they would need to leave. So that's going to be a cost, although we did have a gate for Thanksgiving Day game, which brings in a decent amount of revenue. So it's hard to say until we finish the year based on what our spring sports coaches' costs will be. I really can't give you an exact answer, but I would say I do anticipate there being some shortfall in the athletic revolving account.
Because there's typically shortfall.
There has been in the last few years, yes.
And
I'm sorry,
No,
I don't want
go
to
ahead.
cut you off, but as a parent of high school students who play sports, just as a reminder, you know, what we're paying doesn't begin to cover all of the sports costs. The booster clubs provide a heck of a lot of funding, uniforms, assistant coaches' salaries, in some
Transportation.
cases, transportation,
So those kids and families are out there fundraising to supplement this. And that's in addition to the fees that are being paid for those sports. So I just don't want people to think that this funds the complete sports program, because it by no means does.
And when we have to cover a shortfall, do we take it out of school?
It's been coming out of the general fund because we've had the money in previous years. I don't know
We
where,
probably
why.
wouldn't have
Yeah, right now, the projection we received 2 weeks ago did not include an additional amount to cover a deficit in athletics.
Okay, and so the FY16 Metco LHS teacher salary, is that a district-wide, or is that just at the high school?
Just at the high school. It's just the use of, again, grant funds to help reduce cost of our program.
And then I just noticed on the FY16 school choice teacher salary at LHS, there's not a huge increase from FY16 to FY17, but there is quite a bit of a jump from FY15 and 13 and 14, so I just wanted to...
Yeah, and that really,
about that.
what that has to do with is when we have encumbrances left at the end of the year, we normally have about $300,000 in teacher salaries. So when we have encumbrances left, we have to move them onto our school choice and move salary expenses up into the general fund, so it's an offset. So, but we budget and receive about $300,000 every year, or for the last few years, but it hasn't all been going towards teacher salary. It's gone towards other expenses that are encumbered on June 30th. But because they occur after the fiscal year, they don't show up on a report.
Okay.
Are you good?
I think I'm good. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just
No,
needed
no,
to
no,
go
I wanted to
through.
make sure you had a chance to go through them.
Thank you. I just needed to go through the line items that I saw kind of either large increases or large decreases, because I wanted to just do a double check. I appreciate it.
And so at least what I'm hearing from this is there are no, while we went through quickly line by line, there aren't any real lines that are standing out to make any further reductions. Am I correct in that assumption?
Or that are cushioned. Has that been?
You're going to make a cut, and it's going to have an impact, no matter where you make it.
Right.
Whether it be in utilities, whether it be in discretionary, whether it be in staffing. So the cuts we've already made are going to potentially have an impact if we don't realize the savings, or if we expend based on usage of our therms. So when you ask me, are there places to cut? I think admin team brought forward their recommendations. We spent time going through and assessing the impact of those recommendations. And so, if you want to go somewhere else, you have to weigh, what impact that potential reduction is going to have on class size, on the program, and on services.
Russ?
So, I'd like to, if we could just step back for a minute, just so I'm clear about what we're going to do here tonight. So, my understanding of where we're at is we had a unanimous vote, 7-0, that we wanted to present the budget as we did. We had a second meeting where we talked, and there was discussion but no vote. And basically what happened at that meeting is that I think some of the committee felt we should just stick with that, no compromise. I think there was others of us, including myself, that felt in some respect we were negotiating against ourselves because we didn't actually have a voted offer by the board. What we had is something from the town manager indicating that this might be a compromise number. So I think that's what happened at the last meeting. In between that, we had some couple presentations, it appears, to the Board of Selectmen, which I watched. I guess based on our norms, where I feel we're at right now is that we have to say as a board, unanimously, that we've decided at the moment that we don't, that this is our budget and that we're not compromising. And I'm not sure that message was exactly what was relayed to the board based on my watching of the video. So I think it's important that whatever the vote is, we need to relay it as we did this. This is the vote of the committee.
Right, but it doesn't have to be a unanimous vote. It's whatever the vote is, then the board accepts the vote for what it is.
That's right. But I think the message can't be that they did something or, 4 out of the 7 members did something.
No.
Once we vote, we all support the decision. I mean, that's what we
Correct.
voted on as
Prior
first
to
norms.
tonight, there was no vote.
The second thing I'd say is, I think going forward, we need to be real clear about how we communicate with the board. If we're going to do it, I think we all need to know in advance that's going to happen. Now, sometimes you go to a board meeting and it just, they call you up, ask you a question, I understand that. But if there's a board meeting where you're actually asked to be present and speak, then we should all know that that's going to happen before it happens. Except for the public forum, obviously that's different. I think the one thing I said at the public forum is the options before the committee right now are either we cut the middle school team or, as I said to the board that night, and I said as an individual, I would ask them to cut, the 7,000 extra they're putting into OPEB and capital and one other area. But I think that we need to think as a committee, and now I think we're in the discussion about do we change our original vote or do something different. But is there something else, as Mr. Mazza just indicated? So we don't want to cut the middle school team, but is there some other area? I mean, we have the parking fee, which potentially we could work with that. That's almost 50 grand. And I don't know the answer to that, but that's the first thing that I hear back from the board is, you have this large budget, it's 50% of the town's budget. Are there other areas that we can look at to cut some additional funds? Now, is that, support staff, or is it some of the things that you were trying to run through? But is there something else? If we don't want middle school teachers, what else is there that we can look at to try to come to a compromise? And I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, presumably the administrative team didn't just look at music in middle school. There was probably other things that they looked at that potentially we could look at as a committee. But I do think looking at this situation, in my mind at least, if there's a way to come up with a third option, we should definitely explore it. Now, maybe it doesn't exist, but I think we need to explore it because I don't think it is. I agree with Michael that I think the board's been, reasonable this year with the number that they've given us. The issue is looking back, the numbers haven't always been reasonable, which is one of the ways you get into the situation we're in now. So what I'd like to figure out is there some third option?
Michael?
So I agree with Russ, kind of piggybacking on what I said earlier. I think that if there are areas where we can make further reductions without impacting delivery of services, especially in the classroom, that we should certainly be examining those. We don't have to make our mind up about what that number is going to be tonight, and we certainly don't have to settle on, if we are going to compromise, what that compromise is going to be tonight. We have basically up until the minute before the moderator calls town meeting to order to decide on what we're going to do. And we have the ability immediately following town meeting to amend our budget to reflect the decision we've made. What I would say, and Kim, first of all, thank you for taking the time to go through every single line and ask those questions, because I think, similar to how the select board conducted their budget, it's important that we demonstrate that we actually do look at every single line. That's important. I would like to refer the budget back to Finance Subcommittee to take a look at what option number 3 looks like, if it looks like anything at all, if it manifests in any sort of way, so that they can...
Hold on that thought just a second. Because Finance Sub met.
Yeah. What's option number 3?
Have you...
Well, they want us to come up with an option number 3. And can I...
And if you've already had that conversation, I'd love to know more about it.
That's why I wanted to cut you right there and let them speak, because I believe that part of that discussion was had.
I just wanted to bring something else up while we're having this discussion. I've been informed, I don't know if anybody went to the town's finance committee last week, the finance committee meeting last week, but there is a member on the finance committee, the town's finance committee, that isn't particularly happy with the select board's allocation to us as it is now. with the additional 183,000. And there is the chance that on the town floor, what they will do is, on the warrant, usually there's a there's a little tagline on the bottom that says the Finance Committee approves this or they don't approve this. They will hold their decision and the recommendation will be made at town floor.
That's on the warrant.
Right.
No.
On the warrant. And so what would happen is that they would read the warrant.
Right.
And then the Finance Committee would get up at that moment and give their recommendation one way or the other. I have been told that there's the possibility that someone could get up on town floor at that point, read the warrant, and give their thoughts on it, and want to ask the town meeting to amend the budget to reduce the $180,000 that they've already allocated to us before we even vote on the budget.
No, that's interesting. And I know we have the chair of the Finance Committee here, but it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the warrant must go to print with a recommendation from the Finance Committee.
No.
Is that not true?
The warrant, it was published online, and it has a little blurb at the bottom.
Right.
They'll announce it on the floor.
And I think, Kim,
I don't know if that's legal, though.
you were
Is that legal?
alluding to that the Finance Committee is hoping that we would come to a compromise or collaboration with the Select Board
Before Wednesday.
much sooner than later, so that
Right.
it could be an agreed-upon amount in the warrant, as opposed to taking this to town floor and having amendment after amendment after amendment
Sure.
Which
being
puts,
presented.
Although, I guess my response to that is the Select Board voted to approve their budget about a week ago. This is the
Right.
first time the board has met. It's not as if
Not trying for other meetings, let's just.
I'm just saying that this is the first time that the school committee has had the opportunity to meet to discuss the Select Board's final number in their budget as reflected in the warrant. We do deserve and have the opportunity to take our time, and actually,
I
we
agree.
should be, that is what we owe the community. We owe
Right.
the community a thoroughly reviewed budget that has made every possible accommodation to match up with the number and the allocation the Select Board's providing us. And if we can't reach that point of agreement, then through mechanisms allowed, by town meeting time, we can make an amendment to the budget. But I don't know if we should be running up against an artificial deadline that a board that acts in an advisory capacity is demanding we make.
They're not demanding. I don't,
They're-
I want to clarify.
I don't think they're-
The Finance Committee and the Select Board are trying to be collaborative. They are not affording any other department in town the opportunity to continue to work with them on their budget. What was decided for police, here's your number, period. Fire, here's your number, period. Parks and Rec, here's your number, period. They're continuing a dialogue with us.
Sure, but I
So-
also think that that's kind of not that's not an equal argument, because they are the board that has the sole discretion over the police department budget and the fire department budget. We are the board that has the discretion over our budget and the autonomy to make decisions regarding our budget.
John?
What's wrong with having a fight on the town floor? What is so horrible about that democratic process? Nothing. We are at an impasse with what the Select Board, I think, in an arbitrary and capricious manner, came up with 2.5%, 2.6, 2.7. If you read Mr. Crane's comments in the newspaper, he moves it around and then says, well, we did real well compared to this figure that we just threw up. Well, they're playing a little game with us. At no point have they cited, for example, our claim is that free all-day kindergarten is good for children. It is a positive thing for this town, based on empirical research. I haven't seen anyone on the other side who doesn't want to fund that show that, no, that's a waste of money. It's just a few people offering an opinion in an arbitrary and capricious manner. Oh, that's no good. That's good for Hoyoke, someone said a year ago or 2 years ago, because we've been fighting this thing for a couple of years. That's good for Hoyoke, that's good for Springfield, but we don't need it in Long Meadow. No evidence, just a claim on the floor. Well, look, let's take this to the floor. let's see who's got the support of the public. I think we're up against some arbitrary figures. People keep talking about we're heading towards 2022, and we're going to be at the end of Prop 2.5. I'd like to remind everyone that Prop 2.5 came into existence back in 1980 as a rebellion against property taxes. And by the way, this town only narrowly approved it. Okay? It stripped away school committees from the power of autonomy. Maybe some people like that. Frank Bellotti, to his everlasting shame, was the Attorney General at the time, and he let 7 questions appear as one ballot item. That's what Prop 2.5 was all about. So those of us who know the history of Prop 2.5 know how arbitrary it was and is. Because you just take a figure, and as Michael pointed out, if this year you only get X, you have to move forward to next year based on that anchor that you created the previous year. Okay? It's not education friendly, and I guess it's not meant to be. It's meant to be for the people who care more about the tax rate than they care about the constituents of the schools. So I think we should take it to the floor and find out who's got the support.
So John, just...
Instead of sitting here and, as I said before, participating in anticipatory surrender.
So John, I just think it's only fair to note, because I did attend every select board meeting for all of the budgets up to and including the public forum. And not once did any member of the select board state that they don't support free full day or tuition-free kindergarten. They didn't say that they didn't see the necessity or the importance of it. It's just trying to balance the needs of the school with the needs of the town with the funds that are available. Not one select board member said that they, didn't believe in its value. So, I don't want the community at large who hasn't seen their meetings to think that,
Right.
they don't care about it, because that was not the sentiment that was brought up in all of those meetings that they had.
Well, I think we could ask some questions about the select board's sense of fairness. Last year, they voted to have a multi-tiered assessment system for commercial property versus residential. This year, they saw the light, or some saw the light, not everyone, it was divided, but decided, no, a flat rate's what we need. Well, the flat rate benefits those who own large chunks of real estate in this town, okay? And so you get into the issue, the fundamental issue of fairness. So if that's what they want to talk about, well, let's throw that into the hopper as well.
I think your point's well taken, that I don't think that we're hearing anything negative about what our ambitions are. And I think it is important to note that, we are a community. We all have needs. We have, they have just as many needs as we do. Our job, although it is to, bring a budget forward that makes a lot of sense for the community, also means that we need to come forward with a budget that reflects our collective values, and that's what we've done. And I don't think sticking to our guns on that is a bad thing. I think that is what we're hearing from the community, or at least our constituency, that they want us to do.
So just to get back to Michael's original point about the legality of it. So we are the only department where they actually have to negotiate or discuss the budget. But the other aspect of that is, my understanding is that our budget will be the one put on the warrant, and then it would have to be amended by someone at town meeting in order to change it. That's my understanding of the way it's worked, and legally the way it should work. So it's not that we need to go to town meeting and amend, it's that the board would have to go to town meeting and amend.
I think we would have to amend the total raise and appropriate number on the warrant itself to increase the 125 grand to...
My understanding of what has been the advice in this town in the past is that the number that's voted on by the school committee has to be on the warrant.
It has to be presented. The town manager has to present what we voted, but he has to present to the community what we voted upon, but that does not have to be included in his recommendation.
So the actual overall budget number would be the one voted by the board with a comment that ours was actually a different number.
Correct.
And then we would amend.
Are you sure I was told legally that they have to present the budget that you present?
Yeah, the first motion has to.
Right, that they have to say what we voted on. However, then it goes into what the town manager and
His
select board
presentation.
is presenting. But they have to present what we did vote on.
If I could, anyone can make an amendment from the floor. You write it out, you get a second, and it will be proposed before the town meeting and voted. Then we can argue back and forth about how much, well, actually, the amount can be clearly identified. That's just an accountant's report.
So I
And
think-
then it's an amendment, voted up or down.
So I think, Michael, going back to your point of wanting to refer it back to Finance Sub, and I think Finance Sub has had discussions, and we heard from Tom that admin has made recommendations where it's keeping the cuts as far away from classroom and services as we can. I'm not sure that it's beneficial to be asking admin to look at it again, or Finance Sub to be looking at it again, because I don't know that they're going to find anything new,
It's a big binder you got there.
that hasn't been thought of or discussed or thrown out as ideas or proposed without further detrimental effects. I mean, perhaps I'm wrong, but, I'm...
Right. Well, and Tom's point's well taken, that any additional cut that we make to the budget is going to have impact. And we, I guess the question that we have to wrestle with and come to a consensus on is what type of impact is too negative for us to swallow? What type of impact is something we can live with? What type of impact is going to put us potentially in a precarious situation of having to find additional monies to cover shortfalls on things that we're kind of just guessing on, like utilities. So, I'm not suggesting that we go back to the drawing board and, find 125 grand, but what I am saying is if there's 1,000 that we can shave here and 1,000 that we can shave there, that is a really sort of cumbersome activity. And I'm sure that, the numbers, and I know for a fact that the numbers that are reflected in our budget now have really, come from that type of thinking to begin with. But I guess my question is, what can we kind of cobble together to make whatever sort of difference we have in our numbers just a little bit closer together?
Well, I think we can ask them about that 48,000 parking. I think what I was looking to do here is to kind of put, because I know Finance Sub has looked at this and talked about it with Tom, with Marie. I was kind of hoping that we could take the 7 of us and say, where else do you think we should look? Like, what else do you think we should go back and look at? I mean, I'd like to see us talk to them about that parking that's 48,000. I honestly don't see another spot. When I look at recommendation 2 from our last meeting, and I look at the Glenbrook class sizes and the proposed class sizes with the reduction of 1 teacher, I'm just looking at the DESI website right now, and I know we talk about our enrollment going down, and it does for a couple years, and then it goes back up. It goes up in 5th grade, it goes up in 2nd grade, and that's only 2nd grade right now.
Right.
Goes up to where our 7th graders are right now. So I don't want to cut staff thinking we're going to be reducing, our enrollment's reducing, because I don't see it reducing that much.
Right. And we don't want to be in a position where we cut staff and then where there's no capacity in the levy anymore and we can't hire them back.
And we can't hire someone back.
I loved the idea about the parking fee. I just brainstorming on my own. I did want to ask, what would happen if we pushed off the textbooks? I know that's a one-time cost, but maybe in a year or 2 we have more wiggle room. Like, what was that amount that we were talking about for the
Science text and geometry?
Yeah.
$36,000, and we don't have the funds right now to pay for it anyway.
So it's not in the budget anyway.
Not in the budget.
Okay. And then the other, just thought I had, I know last year we added a bus to Williams, and that's 50,000. What's the ridership in there? been like there?
We have pretty good ridership at the middle school level, but
At the Williams?
yeah, because we have only one bus there, so it makes a loop, but I don't necessarily know. I think we use 3, I want to say, for the high school, and then we have 3 at the middle school and 1 at the elementary. So
those all high, right, like she said, the ridership is.
Right, because the Williams bus was not required by law. There's no one over 2 miles.
there are a few that live way in the corner of Western and Severn, which is when you get off the highway and take a right in that corner. There are 6th graders that run more than 2 miles.
Okay, at Williams.
Which was our issue in FY15, was we had to provide transportation to them, and the number of people that were eligible grew by a couple.
Oh,
So,
so we have to.
yeah,
For 6th
we
graders.
did, and one of the things we heard was that people wanted that. So
Yep.
we tried to rework as best we could to not expand the number of buses, we just reallocated them.
But Michael, I'll comment, you've made the comment that, we have up until town floor, we have up until the day after to amend our budget. But do we as a committee want to push? I mean, it's balancing. How strongly do we want to push and potentially be in the situation that the day after town meeting, we're not only having to make 125,000 in cuts, but now we are 225 because we're not fully funding tuition-free kindergarten, versus working with the board and the finance committee to come to a compromise now.
Well, I guess, first
You're
of all.
assuming we're going to lose on the town floor. With that
John,
kind
I
of
have
discussion.
but
you
I
gotta be
have to put it in
pragmatic.
perspective.
have
Yes,
a-
I know
you have to
my
plan
job
B.
here is to look at what is best for 3,000 students and their parents. But I'm also a member of the community. I also pay taxes. I
I
also.
believe all of us do.
Right. But I also see the fact, the different pieces of it, and none of us are in a great position. It's the perfect storm that is hitting all at once, and we're at a point of, are we wanting to dig our heels in to make a point at the risk of losing programming and making even more severe cuts the day after town meeting, or work on compromising and coming to a consensus at this point? No one department in town is getting everything they want in their budget.
Of course not.
I know we're
Either
not.
way, I mean, it's none of the departments.
And you never
Right,
do.
And I think we need to remember, like, when I look at the contractual increases with the salaries and.
Yeah, what was that amount?
So when I add them all up, there was $965,000. If I include the curriculum, the math books, the 3,600 in math books, on top of the contractual salaries. Because when I watched the town meetings, they kept talking about this $600,000 increase in their healthcare costs.
Right.
Well, I'm like, and all I could think of was our increases as well. Our increases, before we look at our budget, were $965,000.
That was salary increases per contract.
Salary, contractual increases, steps and lanes, COLA,
Right.
and the 36,000 in.
I want to add to that, though, you added transportation, which is special ed, which we are obligated to provide.
Yep.
And the 130 in the evaluation line. Again, those are for services for special ed students. So those aren't things we really can just say we're not going to do.
Right, what was
That's
that grand
another-
total? Was
So
that
what's
the
that?
nine?
Another 240,000.
So now where are we at?
240 and 965.
So you're at 1.1.
So we're at $1.1 million in increases that we are mandated, have to look at in our budget before we can think about anything else. So that means we can't add $35,000 geometry books, we can't add a $100,000 elementary science curriculum, we can't add a $50,000 preschool playscape, we can't add a $24,000 health curriculum, which, by the way, the more people I ask in the state, the more elementary schools have than don't have. We don't.
Need it.
I'm just throwing it out there. We are typically budget, let's see, the one-time expenses that I was looking at, we also have $20,000 that we typically budget for building maintenance over the summer. Is that something that we're still funding this?
Yes, we have it in FY17.
We have it in our FY17 budget.
We still don't have full-time adjustment counselors at the middle school, at each school, which is another thing we keep having to pass on.
We don't have
We do
full-time
not.
adjustment counselors at the middle schools?
Not at the middle schools, they split.
And I've heard hands down the benefit of that at
Right.
the elementary schools.
Similar to health, get at it beforehand and.
Right. So I feel like we need to point out some of the things that we 1.1 increase in our budget,
And a lot of cuts along the way.
a lot of cuts along the way, and we are not even touching geometry books that cost $35,000 and are from 1994.
Geometry hasn't changed that much.
Oh,
We have a whole new curriculum. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it. I don't want to start a row right now, but we need to really align with that. That's unacceptable.
No, I know. I trust me, I used that book.
Yeah.
Increase for salaries, because the way you set it for salaries, it sounds like we're getting rich off of it.
I know. I actually, we should point
We
out
have
that
how much staff,
we
I
went
guess that-
through. We have the largest number of employees in the town. I mean, we are the largest entity in town when you look at it as a whole. We negotiated last year 1.5% increase with the teachers, which I think was very generous with both sides. I mean, if a 1.5% increase is a
Reasonable.
What I'll
reasonable.
say is that, Janet, I completely appreciate where you're coming from, and I completely appreciate the pressures that you feel from all sides, and that you've been, you're having conversations with the chair of the select board, you're having conversations with the town manager, with the administrative team. More than anybody on this board, I appreciate and understand exactly what type of pressures you're feeling to try to reach an agreement. I completely understand that. And I'm not adverse or opposed to finding a point of consensus, and I think that that's been pretty clear the whole time, and I think we're trying. I guess my point is that, yes, we need to be prepared for the worst if we end up going the route of going to town meeting. We have to be ready to, figure out how we adjust to that. I don't think anybody here wants to be in a position where we're making reductions to staffing the day after town meeting. I certainly don't. But I think that we need to figure out how we, move the ball a little bit closer so that we can, if there is a point of agreement, which there may not be at this point, but if there is a point of agreement, that we can bridge that gap a little easier with our colleagues on the select board. I'm not opposed to finding that point of consensus, and I don't want to speak for everybody. I don't think anybody here is opposed to finding a point of consensus, but we've made decisions about what we view as important, and unfortunately those are retaining staff, which is incredibly important, and accomplishing a programmatic goal that we've had for 4 years at this point. I think we have to kind of figure out how we got to play this out a little bit further. We have to spend a little bit more time and not feel rushed. We do, I know that it's obviously we don't want to be going on to the point of town meeting where we still don't have a compromise, but I think we have to work this a little bit more. We have to spend the time to understand, what those implications are a little bit better. We have to understand our budget in terms of where can further reductions be made without having a massive impact or a huge impact of one school or one grade. We have to, continue to have a dialogue with the Board of Selectmen and see what further, I know the answer is not many or not at all, but what further reductions there could be on their end, or where additional revenues could come from. We have to spend a little bit more time, and before we get to a point where we either go for it at town meeting or we go in there unified. But I don't think we're there tonight, and I think that we've heard that there's not a lot of room. I think that we can spend a little bit more time trying to figure out what can we do with parking, what can we do with school choice. Is that even an option? What can we do with other sort of grant opportunities? What kind of reductions in terms of supplies can we make? In terms of non-essential staffing, things like that.
Well then, so first off, just to be clear, yes, I'm trying to work and compromise and be
Right.
collaborative, But there are many other members of this board who are having conversations with select board members, with finance committee members. It's not just me.
And
So
just to clarify, that wasn't a dig. That was, I understand the role of the chair and having to have those conversations.
But there are many conversations taking place between other members as well. So this isn't, just a unilateral.
It's moving a slow boat, I know.
But I think if that's the approach that this board wishes to take, then I think that out of fairness to Tom, Anne Marie, and Sue, then this board needs to give them direction of specifically what we want them to look at and how we want to do this, because if we're not, I truly believe that the admin team has done all that they can in terms of trying to come up with different scenarios and different reductions and different compromises. If this committee is wishing for them to send back and say, we want you to look at it again, then I think we need to be very specific in what we're wanting them to look at. Because otherwise I think it's going to be, I think it's unfair to them because they've already done that exercise.
I'm in full agreement with you on that. We've already done that. And we've got a report from the administrators of what they can live with and can't live with, or live without. We know, and we have a figure.
Well, we cut 7,200 from admin, and
Yeah.
we cut 10,000
The
from
select board
tech.
has the money, and we've got the need.
Russ?
So, I think the big picture here is the board has indicated they support making the change in kindergarten, and we voted to do that. The question is, I think on the board side, they have decided that they don't want to change their policy initiatives in those 3 areas, and we decided that the thing that we came up with to try and make this happen, the middle school team, doesn't work for us. I think in the conversations with the board, I think probably what some of us have heard is that there's an issue as far as we have a $33 million budget, and it's a $125,000 gap, and the only possible thing we have on our side to cut is 4 middle school teachers or 3.
Or music.
Or music. So,
Which is in the 125,000.
so it really comes down to, are we being, that wouldn't have been my first choice. I'm not an administrator, but there might be something else we can look at. So is there support staff? Is there something else in our budget? We looked at supplies, and unfortunately through this process, I don't think the board's seen completely what we did early on in the process, and this process needs to change next year so that it's more transparent right in the beginning. It was open meetings, but I don't think the board understood exactly what we've been doing to try and cut to get to the number, because as Kim pointed out, we needed to cut just to get to 808 without kindergarten. It wasn't gonna, this is not a level service budget, because it's not enough money to make it a level service budget, even if we take kindergarten out completely. So I think we need to, for one, I really need to be convinced myself that there's not somewhere else we can cut that makes sense compared to what their policy initiatives are. Now, very well may be the case that there isn't anything else we can cut, but I think we need to talk about that at this, at our meeting, so the public understands, what were the other options, why we said no, if it's paras or support staff or custodians or clerical, whatever it is, these are the reasons we couldn't do it. We can't touch those because we only have one clerk at at one building or whatever it is. But I don't think, the feedback I seem to be getting, I think, from the town side is they wonder, did we do that sufficiently to get to the point where the middle school team was the only thing we could possibly cut? And if it is, if that, we go through that analysis and that's the only thing we could possibly cut, then I think we go to town meeting and we say, listen, I don't want to cut the middle school team in order to allow OPEB to be, more money to be saved towards OPEB. But if there's some other compromise, then I think we should talk about it, and if there isn't, we rule it out.
Other choices that you can look at are the things you've put in recently, the literacy coaches at the elementary school, the adjustment counselors at the elementary school. You could look at cutting programs at the high school. You've added women's health and put in some phenomenal programs there. Again, you'll be looking at decreased opportunities for students at the high school. If you did that, these are things that the administrative team discussed, but those were the other options that we had, and we ruled them out because we felt that a little bit higher class size without losing program and without losing those coaches would be better. We valued the addition of the adjustment counselor at the elementary school. The middle school has a guidance counselor and a halftime adjustment counselor, so you have a 1.5 ratio for 300 kids, while the elementary schools only have a 1.0 adjustment counselor for
Okay.
over 300.
So I think if we walk through that a little bit slower, that might be productive because, well, for one thing, I want to go back to school choice too, by the way. So school choice, if the town's using $100,000 out of free cash, we can't use one-time money on our side. We can't use $200,000 worth of one-time monies for $100,000 of additional, savings later or state aid later. So I think the school choice would be a bad idea to go down that road because, we can't have the town doing $100,000 in free cash and us essentially doing the same thing on our side. So if we go to the next level, if it's not middle school teachers, the next level would be, again, staff, based on what you just said. And could you walk through those again? It's the literacy coach?
The literacy coaches at the elementary were added last year. They provide staff development. They do actual coaching of teachers. With the number of new teachers at elementary school, they've been instrumental in helping them expedite their proficiency in teaching literacy and using the new program. So that was one thing that we discussed, and people felt very strongly, the elementary principals, that was an area that should not be cut, that it's making a huge difference in student achievement.
And how much money is that approximately?
It would be...
Roughly, I know we're
You have
kind
three,
of putting it.
you have one at each elementary school, so, at minimum, you're talking, I'd say at least 60,000, but probably a little bit more each, because,
Each?
Yeah.
So like 180?
So we had, what did we have before that?
We shared.
Yeah, they were at 0.5 and 0.5 and 1.
we started at 2.
No, it was 2, right? Didn't Wolf Swamp have a
Yeah,
full-time?
1.0, and then Blueberry
Yeah,
and
they shared.
Center shared a 0.5.
So we only increased that
And
year
it's
with
part of that-
60,
part of our
67,000.
Pardon?
That's,
Yeah, so it's not even.
and then the math coaches at the elementary?
Those were new, those were added too. No.
There's that math specialist.
Math specialists.
They work with students.
Mhm.
And the intent of the literacy coaches, that was to improve our,
Balanced literacy program.
really ideally, it should be improving
And teacher-
outcomes.
Right, and right.
At the
Practice for
elementary.
teaching, using that, balanced literacy. Writers and Readers Workshop. And they also will need to step up their game with PD next year because we've cut PD, money out of the PD budget. So.
Okay.
The math specialists worked up until this past year primarily with students, but they've taken on a huge role with the new math curriculum and doing coaching and setting up professional development and answering questions along the way. So they've been very pivotal in that introduction to that new program.
And how much is that approximately, the math specialist? What do you-
A little less.
3 teachers. It's going to be bumping, so you might bump a little less salary teacher, so. It might not be
150.
60, it might be 55.
Okay, what were the other?
Adjustment counselors at the elementary school, we added from half-time to full-time last year. Again, they're seeing students in need, not only in Longmeadow, but throughout the state. We're hearing of more and more students coming in with needs where they need to see somebody and need servicing in that area. So that was again, another priority of the elementary principals, that we not cut that.
And that would be, that wasn't 3 new individuals.
It
We
was a
just made it
1.5
full-time.
increase.
Yeah.
But the
So that's
literacy
like
was just a
75
one-time,
or something.
one-person increase, and the math specialist was an increase of 1 person before, from what we went to in the last couple of years.
So we had a math coach.
We had a math
a couple of years ago.
And that was eliminated already.
Eliminated that from the budget.
Because that was not
Okay.
effective having one person go to 3 schools.
So you had 1 math coach for 3 elementary schools, and we added 3 math specialists.
We've had a math specialist for quite a while.
For like 3 or 4 years?
As long as
They've
I
been
can
here a long
remember.
time.
5 years?
And
We no longer have the math coach. That was
Right.
eliminated last year.
That was a Title I funding
Oh, so
position.
we had math specialist and a math coach at the same time, and we eliminated our math coach last year?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
The math coach had been added, I think, 3 years ago.
Through Title I funds, mostly.
Okay.
And I was at a PTO meeting where the new adjustment counselor at Blueberry presented. And it seems like basically it's intervening before things really become an issue with the smaller kids in elementary level or younger kids. It gives them a person to go to. It's really, I think, trying to prevent all the behavioral issues that we get and that would continue if somebody doesn't intervene early. And sometimes you don't go to the principal for that. But if you have somebody in the building full-time, it allows for that. And according to Principal Pratt, it really seems to be making a big difference as far as the way kids are interacting with each other and also their behavior at the school.
So they've finally been able to do some preventative stuff. They go into the classrooms and do social skills lessons and things like that. And before, if you had a crisis when you came in on a Monday, well, too bad you needed to wait till Tuesday in order to get to see the adjustment counselor because he or she was at a different school that day. So
They have
like
lunch
putting out-
bunches and friendship
putting out
groups so
fires,
that
yeah.
they're fostering and developing those skills early on, again, being proactive, as well as handling crises.
So what was the next, and I know this is not ideal, obviously, because this makes people worry that maybe their job is on the chopping block and it's not a good, but I think ultimately, if we're going to support this budget, you have to show what are the other options and why we didn't choose them. Because if you don't do that, you get questions about, well, what did you really look at?
We'll kind of have to look at all of the people that are probably not directly in the classroom and what the support staff maybe is.
Well, the support staff, most of that is tied to IEPs, so it's not a matter that you can go in and cut paras. We had a report, when I first came 6 years ago, the district community partners came in and said we had way too many paras, and we started cutting back, and we had more behavior problems, we had more out-of-district placements, because we did cut back, as the report indicated we
And
should.
outcomes really-
It backfired.
Yeah.
So when we look at paras, they're tied to IEPs, and there's really no room in there to cut any paras.
And usually you look at clerical custodians, and that becomes tough after years of, if you don't get a certain amount of funding, after years of that, that's usually the first thing you go to, and you may be down to a number that you can't go below.
Yep.
What was it after adjusting
High
counselors?
school teachers, the area has not been identified, but there are new programs there. We have, the high school schedule is extremely complicated because students take 6 courses, unlike many high schools. They get a wonderful education. It's why they excel at what they do. But when you reduce the number of teachers, it reduces the opportunity for students to take certain classes. You could eliminate program, but again, we've built a wonderful women and men's health classes and PE. We've built more programming into the math department, so anytime you're looking at cutting in any of those areas, you're talking about possibly impacting program, and you're definitely impacting students' ability to get to certain courses because there won't be enough slots in the schedule for them to be able to access them.
What's the average class size at the high school?
It varies based on it. I think they can go anywhere from 18 to 26, 27. But I
So
could pull up a
anything-
class report for you. The last time I looked, that's
It's hard to
approximately
gauge a high school average class size. It depends on what kids are picking and what they need and how many kids are taking AP
how many sections are
versus
offered.
honors. Yep.
But if I don't know who the principal or you guys, someone sees that the class size is getting below what? Do they reevaluate the need for that class?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, they
Guidance
cancel
counselors do that.
classes.
Like you don't have a class with 12 kids?
They don't
8
run
kids.
typically.
Yeah, right.
It's like college courses.
You might, for an MCAS prep course, have something that's low with 8 to 12 kids, but it's intentional. It's an
Okay,
English
that-
class that's designed that way. You may have a math class that's designed with a low class size. It's very unusual, but the average is bumped up because on the other end, you'll have an AP class that will have a lot more students in it.
In an MCAS prep that has a student ratio that low, there's a specific need?
Absolute need that they're not going to pass the MCAS unless they're in a smaller class size, getting an awful lot of feedback from the teachers.
If we look back, like 3 to 5 years at the high school, do we have more teachers, about the same number of teachers? I mean, has that fluctuated, or?
We've cut, since I've been here, high school teachers.
We've cut
So we have cut, but we're
So when
trying
you
to hold
say
the
no
line.
programs in the high school, it's simply that we have teachers teaching other courses?
The
Is that-
enrollment's gone down slightly, so we've been able to add some new courses. We did, many, many years ago, add a PE teacher so that they could build some of these programs. But again, the class size in PE is like 25, 26. It's not
We
like,
needed to add, to maintain our accreditation at one point not too long ago. We were down below the,
Because they were up over 30, almost
Yeah.
35 in class at least.
So we have less teachers, but because of some declining enrollment, we'd be able to add programs.
exactly, exactly.
Because part of the issue, I think at some of the board meetings, is they were talking about new initiatives, which, I've only been on the committee a year. I know we don't have any this year. But I'm not sure what's happened over the last, 4 or 5 years as far as new initiatives. If you have declining enrollment, usually that means you have less programs. But, okay, so what else besides high school teachers? Is that the last?
It's the last I can remember. Tom, Sue, do you remember anything else?
Let's take the middle school. We haven't talked about
Media
anything.
specialist.
The team at Williams.
Well, so we got rid of something, though. We got rid of the library aides,
But it was being replaced by a media specialist.
and one
Shared.
media specialist is going between the two schools, and that was literally the same amount of money allocated.
Yes,
Should
it
have been
was.
close, yeah.
So that
it's
was just
to-
a wash.
that's to
It
fill
was
the
a-
gap between elementary students who receive library skills and middle schools who get nothing, then come to the high school and are required to do all this kind of research that they haven't been doing able to do for the past.
And that's where the Williams team came up, because we'd be able to maintain program, increase class size a little bit, but keep the programs that we have across the board.
So if we got rid of the media specialist, then there would be no
No library.
no library
no
at the
library
middle
at
school.
middle.
Right.
So how about another thing that's come up a number of times, I've had questions about, in the special ed area, if we were able to hire more staff to do some of the evaluations.
So we're looking at the speech numbers right now to see if we can reduce that, shaking your head, the consultant line and bring in our own staff. The challenge is when we share staff between schools, the schedules don't meet up.
And then you end up having another staff member plus.
Yeah, so,
Consultant.
right, but we started a pretty in-depth study at speech, and I'll try to meet with the speech pathologist before the end of the school year to see what we can do for shifting folks around. And
Is
well,
that
we'll
the
have to do it soon
only
with every
area
notice.
would be speech? How about,
So the psychology department is a really specialized service. It's a clinical psychologist who we need to look at students who are kind of really having some serious social emotional issues, and that's not the typical role of a school psychologist. So,
Yeah.
we've had quite a few of those requests lately, and so it's better for us to have her on kind of retainer. And she's here a day and a half a week, or up to 2 days a week, I think now. And she's got a very full schedule.
okay.
We also have an increase in our English language learners, so that we actually had the principals meet, and they've worked on developing schedules so that we could share more efficiently, so that we didn't have to increase staffing in that area, because if we hadn't done that, we'd be looking at another .5 or a full-time teacher, so that the principals did a great job of working that out.
Landers especially.
Yeah.
Yep.
In the supply lines, I know in looking back at the budget that basically, and it looks like you've probably done this for a while, just basically flatline it or gone down. Trying to think, is there, what about custodians, clerical, staff of that nature? Are we down to a point where there's just no ability to look at consolidating?
I think the custodians are flat out. I mean, yeah, schools are conceded
And I
different.
think we
With the
talked about how
clerical, we
high school
talked
maybe
about
needs
that.
them.
We saw no flex in the clerical right now either.
Okay.
So,
And I imagine
We
that
had
would have
looked
been
at
one of the
that.
first things to look at because
Yep.
it's not educational, so.
Yep.
okay.
Like, yeah, what would happen if we went from 2 to 1 at the elementary schools? And I don't know what's it.
I can't come pick my phone call up now. I can't imagine if there's only one of them. But that might be on purpose.
They have such different roles.
The two different,
Yeah.
they have two
Yeah.
different roles.
And that is pretty typical to have two
They have to have someone to
clerical in a
cover
building that size.
lunches
too.
and breaks.
I'm not suggesting, I'm just.
Yeah, no,
No,
I'm just trying to
throwing it out
explain.
there, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's- I brought it up too. I mean, it's,
And to be fair, they're not full-time. The second one's a part-time position, so it's like a .75
Okay,
at the 2 middle schools and the 3 elementary schools.
okay.
so ultimately, the question is, are any of these things something we're willing to, any of these positions, something we're willing to consider cutting? I mean, we could send it back to the subcommittee, but at the end of the day, if that's really what they're going to talk about, It's, I mean, what about technology? I mean, I asked directly the director,
Russ,
but.
is your point with this list now to show that we've looked at all the other things and that we've considered everything?
Well, I think part
Is
of
that
it
the point? Because it sounds like, you know, we're offering cuts, and it's going out now. Oh, yeah, we can cut here, we can cut there. So there's a lot of surplus. There's not, though.
Well, I think what we're
Isn't the
trying-
purpose of this exercise to show the reason we were going to get rid of the middle school teachers was because all these other things were undesirable?
Yeah, I think there's two
But
two
it still
points.
comes down to, oh, go ahead.
One is I wanted to make sure that when I'm saying to the board, you know, at the public forum, that there really isn't anything to cut, else to cut. I want to make sure that that's, you know, accurate, which I believe it is. I mean, we just walked through it. I think it's important for all of us to be comfortable that that's the case. I think the second point is, I think the public and the board needs to know what exactly would we have to look at to make this happen. Because the only thing that they have left based on all the different budgets they've looked at is these, you know, OPEB and capital in those areas. So I want to make sure that we've kind of flushed all that out in public so that we can say, I mean, these are the areas we're looking at. And I really came into today, I was kind of hoping that there was something else like the parking that maybe we could look at.
But that would just be if the town or DPW spends that much money on that parking lot.
Well, that's the thing, we don't even know.
I'm not a parking lot expert, but I don't think that's the
If they
case.
do. I mean, it's a brand new parking lot.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
plowing.
I mean,
But, you know, it
let's-
was just 4 or 5 years ago that parking was raised as an issue by the students, and they pointed out that we were getting money from it,
This was last year, really.
well, a couple of years ago, and they asked us to cut the fee. So, I mean, if we are working with amnesia here, and we don't remember anything about the past, then I think you might be able to talk about parking, but that's not going to fly. It's not going to get past the students, and it's not going to get past the state, isn't that true?
It doesn't have to get past the students. We're just talking about reallocating the parking money.
Well,
Kinda
that
like-
one,
Well, someone's got to pay the parking money.
see,
too,
I don't
right?
think it makes sense for us to hold an account that we don't use
We can't
when the
do-
town's spending money on the parking lots.
We can't do anything with that money. We can't,
Yeah,
Right?
John,
Am I-
the
am I-
parking,
Yeah.
the students pay the fee, it can only be used for the parking lot.
Tom,
So
is it
plowing or
specified
whatever.
that it-
So if the town got it in their budget, and maybe they allocate us some back, it would be an exchange of funds.
Is it only required to fund the high school parking lot, or could it be extrapolated to other building parking lots?
I think if I were looking at this objectively, you charge the fee for the students to park at the high school parking lot, to then use it to pay for costs for Blueberry's parking lot or Glenbrook's parking lot. I don't think would be considered
I'm just trying to
an
find a way
appropriate
to
expense.
expend that fund
I
in
appreciate it,
one
but I
time.
don't think it would be
Okay.
looked upon as the
Right, and
purpose
so
of
then I would
the
have to
fee.
agree with Sue, is I don't think we've got 48,000 or 40,000 and,
No, but unless we could figure out a way to charge the electricity for the light.
But some of it
Yeah,
could go
that's not
towards
even
it.
gonna be
I mean,
that
I think
It's a big
But
parking
then what
lot.
do we use it for?
There could be a lot of snow.
at the end of the day, my opinion is this isn't really about the money, because it's $66 million budget and it's $125,000. What this is about is,
working together.
you got to come up with a compromise that everybody can live with and defend. So right now, the board, I think, is concerned they can't defend where we're at. And I think our concern is, where we're at is we have to start cutting people in order to make it happen. And that's really tough to do. Especially for these type of positions that are the exact type of positions that would help improve scores, improve outcomes for kids, you know, maybe prevent some kids from even needing a plan because they got the support early. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons these things are important, which I can see why you ended up with middle school. I just don't think the community understood all of that. And normally we don't do this because all these people are going to be worried about their jobs.
Exactly.
you know, and regarding the middle schools, you know, when we look at the numbers at Glenbrook compared to Williams, Williams has enjoyed extraordinarily low numbers for class sizes, where Glenbrook has been up in the mid to upper 20s. And so, when struggling and looking at what's best for everyone across the board, I don't know. I don't know why it's fair for one middle school to have class sizes in the teens and one to have it in the mid to upper 20s. Michelle?
So where can we find that out, Janet?
That was given to us at our last meeting.
What?
This is the middle school enrollment projections.
I think we were going to do the split team, though, that was going to take care of that, assuming we keep the team. Would be...
For 7th grade next year.
So the idea was to try and level that out.
Right,
Should
but
that
if
have
we're
happened earlier?
eliminating a team and
maybe.
keeping the math teacher, then it's keeping comparable numbers at both schools.
So, first, I feel like the Glenbrook number issue should have been brought to the attention earlier than this year. I feel like that was a miss somewhere, and if there was a higher class size at Glenbrook, even while we were talking about it last year with Chris Collins, someone should have called it to our attention, so we can't do anything.
The problem is team structure at the middle school. Teams are based on 4. Sometimes in 6th grade they'll do 5, but it's because it's 1 teacher per subject area, so it's not as easy to do that. That's why when you come up with a special number of students that really, a special number of teachers like the 5, we're talking about keeping 3 and keeping 1 math teacher, you really need to develop a complicated schedule. But most of the time, middle schools prefer to have 4 subject teachers per grade level because it's easier to schedule.
So, I was looking at, what does it look like if we're cutting 2, not 4? Because I'm looking at your class size range 2015-2016 at Glenbrook currently, and it goes from 8th grade 21 to 26, 7th grade ELA 16 to 25. Looks like the highest we've got at Glenbrook in anything is 8th grade ELA and social studies at 26, math grade 7 at 26, 1 at 25, and then 6th grade ELA 25. I don't really know how to read this thing.
And I'm pretty sure that right now in the 6th grade, maybe you can speak to this, Kathy, that's where the class size is at Williams. I'm just guessing from where.
Yeah, and your lower numbers are going to be the higher math kids too, so it skews your class size as well. But in 6th grade, that's where we have a lot.
We are now.
That's what
so if we were to cut teachers,
did we ever get where
from
they
that,
are right
then
now?
we're going to get into the.
It's on the back.
You're going to have high 20s in English.
All of the recommendations.
So this puts it to grade 17. If you cut 1 teacher, doing so increase class size to 15 to 26 in grade 7, 18 to 25 in 8.
Right, based on the projection that was given to us, if you look at the chart, for next year, Williams, for grade 7, ELA classes are 24, 25, or 26. Math, 7.1 is 18 to 22. Math 7.2 is 15 to 24. Science is 24 to 26. Social studies is 23 to 26. French is 25. Spanish is 16 to 24.
And that's the current 6th grade that's at the high, we've got 236 6th graders.
That's
This
That's
is
all
for
2 schools.
125 at Williams.
109 at Williams.
That's the
Well-
Williams proposed 16-17 draft. That one.
And then the 7th grade, which is
And then 8th
119.
grade, you're looking at class sizes of 20 to 25 in ELA, 18 to 21 in algebra, 19 to 22 in pre-algebra, 20 to 25 in science, 20 to 25 in social studies, 25 in French, and 22 to 24 in Spanish.
And what are they currently at?
Hang on.
8th grade is very high. The big
8th
class,
grade?
right?
7th is the big one.
And 7th.
7th is,
I mean, when this all,
Isn't the class size around 18?
where?
7th and 8th grade right now?
Depends on what subject, and the higher math is a little bit smaller than the level 2, as you just said. you know, it's just how they fell.
Yeah.
So you talk about 7th grade French versus Spanish, you can't really do that yet because kids haven't picked it.
So current 6th grade at Williams is 126, current 7th grade is 118, and current 8th grade is 140. So next year's 7th will be
It's huge.
big.
This present 6th grade is, I mean,
And it's not as big as the current 8th grade.
And it seems to, like, because the 6th grade at the, is 236, okay.
What's the 5th
Because then it
grade?
goes up again in 2nd grade too. Because we don't want to, get rid of.
I know, but do you keep teachers in? That's like elementary, you have to keep moving, and it's not ideal, but your enrollments next year is, the middle schools is 236, then it goes down to 211, then 208, then 201, then up to 220. So you actually have 4 years of lower enrollment before it bumps up again, and it's still only going to 220 when we're at 236 right now.
So how do we want to move
I
forward?
think it becomes a question of, is a class size of 25 acceptable to the board for middle school? Because it looks like that's what the average will be.
But the average is not, from my perspective, the average is not, what I'm concerned about is what is the maximum.
Well,
Because
what's-
if you have, 25 is an average, no problem. If you have a class of 30, then I think that's too much.
Right?
Taylor worked it out, and he thinks the max would be 26 on that chart that I gave you last week.
If we
Right.
keep one, just the
Mhm.
math teacher.
If we keep the math teacher, that would help balance off the math classes.
26 at Williams, and Glenbrook just stays the
Same
way
thing.
it is.
Glenbrook's enrollment drops slightly, and they have one section of 26, I think, right now.
What did you say for ELA numbers?
ELA
Same thing,
7th
under
grade next
26.
year?
For 7th grade is 24, 25 or 26 for 7th grade, and 20 to 25 for 8th grade, which are the same numbers for your science and social
Does-
studies for 8th grade,
20.
and the same for your science and social studies for 7th grade.
It's
So you look-
125 kids divided by 5 sections, 5 teachers in 5 sections. So it's, so if you did it straight, it's 25, but you can't because of the math, it skews it. But when you add the extra math position, it should balance it so you don't have as much disparity among the classes.
Is social studies, is it 26?
23 to 26. So all of them are going to be 23 to 26.
My concern is if we lay off 3 teachers at the middle school, the chances of us in the future being able to hire them back is just, the way the budget's going in this town, I mean, we're going to hit the levy ceiling of 25 within 4 or 5 years. I mean, we don't have the capacity to
But shouldn't
really
we, in
add
those
staff.
4 to 5 years, be also working on a middle school SOI for a combined middle school, which would help alleviate?
Yeah, but that's a
That's so far
15-year
out.
solution to a 5-year problem.
But there's also, I mean, to be honest, if we're going to lay it all out there, if I was on a different board in the town and I was looking at all these projects, that's the only one that actually addresses the 25 per thousand at all. Not the DPW, not the senior center. If we really want to address that issue, why don't we start talking about the middle school project? That's the one that makes us more efficient.
Luckily, it's on the agenda.
Number of buildings is really the way to become more efficient. So adding a DPW, that's going to add costs, because we're going to have more heating and cooling costs, because that building down near the dump is tiny. We're going to create a big building. We're going to have to have custodians, you're going to have to heat it, cool it, all those things. Now, the middle school project, I was on the subcommittee. I don't think it makes sense right now because of when we look at the long-term cost of debt in this town, about 5 years out, it starts to make more sense. But that's true of DPW and senior center too. I mean, all those things are. So if we're really looking to not hit the 25, we need to do projects like that are more efficient. I don't think the senior center or the DPW is going to be more efficient. I think it's going to be less efficient. So I think that's if we're looking at an overall way to look at our town, I'm really concerned about the 25 per thousand. I just don't think we're addressing it right now in the correct way.
We're not doing it, yes.
So,
Yeah, you can see right here, just in the natural gas cost alone, the line item for the high school, from when we had our old high school, it was $207,000 in our FY in 13, and our FY17 budget is $65,000. That's $150,000 savings.
But that makes sense when you're going from the same size building to a more efficient building. If you're going from a little building to a very large building, and you have to heat and cool it, the numbers are going to look different.
We'll save on administration, custodians, kitchen staff, secretarial. There will be savings across the board if you go to one middle school.
So when we go to one middle school, we'll save on all that as well as utility costs.
I mean, the bottom line is, if we hit the 25, we're going to have to look at the elementaries too. You can't have 3 elementaries and 2 middle schools and a high school in this size town that's the only way to become more efficient, other than just laying off staff constantly.
Maybe not.
So I'm worried that if we lay off the 3, even if we do the middle school, that's going to be years from now. I just don't know that we'll ever get them back, which is why I kind of go back to, if that's what we're weighing, then you have OPEB and capital, which I completely agree with that policy decision. I think the board's doing the right thing with that. I think the issue is, does the extra 7,000 towards OPEB, the extra whatever it was towards capital, it's not the underlying policy decision, it's the extra amount. Is that really more important than what we're looking at here?
For just 1 year, isn't there a way we can not put that additional money into those accounts for this year?
Well, I think next year, unfortunately, we're probably in the same boat where we're going to have to cut again. And so is the town.
Oh, I think every year we're going to be in that boat if we don't get more funding. For level service. We already had to cut for level service. So.
Yeah. There's no way, forgetting kindergarten, we were going to cut this year no matter what. And we did it based on enrollment, but if we had the money, we wouldn't have cut all those people. I mean, we said, well, it's because enrollment allows us to do it. It's not that we wanted to do it. It would have been better to have those staff stay here, and we would have had lower class sizes. But that's not what we did, because we needed to try and make this other kindergarten, and we wanted to keep Williams.
I'd prefer not to cut the middle school team. I think the lower class size is beneficial at the middle school, but we went through everything. I see nothing else left if we have to cut.
Well, and we just went from a level 2 to a level 1 at Williams.
Yeah.
What?
You have two middle schools at level 1 in your high school. That will decrease. We'll go down to level 2 probably.
And Williams just got there, maybe from the smaller.
We were there and then
Yeah.
by that point. And then back.
So,
I just have a question for Tom. In our revolving account, what about our concession and vending machine money? We have a little bit of a balance there. Can we use that?
So we do have some money, we have 5,000 appropriated in next year's account out of the vending. And the concession stand is really limited to the concession stand. I mean, it's not open to be just used for educational purposes. We reinvest it in equipment, as needed.
Right. So that couldn't be something that we could turn over to the town because they own the buildings and then they could.
I mean, I don't know how much it
use
costs.
equipment.
Yeah, we buy the equipment. They clean it, but I don't necessarily know they're going to reduce the staff associated to that cost. And again, I don't even know how they could apportion out how much to look at it, but I don't think you're going to come up again, but with a couple $1,000s, maybe.
Okay. Just talking.
So I'm not saying I want to do this, I just want to explore this for a second. So if the decision was not to do kindergarten at all, we just leave it the way it was, the outcome of that is we don't get the extra $100,000 from the town. So we have a $225,000 difference. How would that work out if we just ended up with just no kindergarten at all? We're back to a
Well, you'd have to put the half-day kindergarten back in, so on top of the 225, you'd have to add 35,000 for the half-day program, so you'd be looking at about 260. Again, depending upon what enrollment's going to be for the tuition program, if you anticipate we're going to get up to 130 paying students, you're going to be looking at somewhere around, $2,000 to $2,200.
So what are we short then?
You'd need about 260,000 if we decided to keep a tuition based on the 125 we're already short between the school committee budget and what the select board voted, but then the 100,000 that's been used to get to that figure, I guess, would be no longer available. So that would take us 225 and then 35,000.
But that just brings us back to cutting the whole middle school team.
Yes, pretty much. Well, you
Maybe
get
more than that.
220, yeah.
Another 35 on that.
So then the question really is, if we're going to keep running up against all these, sort of difficult decisions, which we may have to face anyway, are we just going to go to town meeting and try to get the 125 and do everything we want to do? Because what it seems to me is that we can make decisions that are going to increase class size and put level 1 status at risk. They're going to put our ability to serve or provide services to students at risk. We're going to have higher class sizes. It's none of these things seem to be like optimal outcomes. So it's one of two things. It's, do we continue to charge for tuition? Because that to me, it seems like the more unfortunately, and it is unfortunate, but that's kind of the more palatable thing, because we're already charging for tuitions for kindergarten and we're not making reductions to middle school teams. Or do we go to town meeting? Neither one of those are like the best option.
The problem is we're so close that I would like to go to town meeting with us and the finance committee and the board agreeing to a number.
Right.
I'm trying to figure out a way to make that happen, and the only thing so far is this parking fee, which is 48 grand, but it's not all in 1 year.
But Russ, right now, we're the only ones talking about moving. I'm not hearing anything from the select board about their willingness to change.
Well, I've gone to...
compromises, takes two, at least. Right?
Yeah, but I've gone to a number of their meetings, and I have to say, to be fair, I think the board has moved a number of times. So, my concern last meeting wasn't that they didn't move, but my concern was, if the superintendent went, which didn't happen, but let's say the superintendent went to the board and made an offer. That's not an offer that we voted on, so it doesn't mean much to the other side, or it shouldn't. And Marie Angelides said this at their the last meeting I attended or watched, that they hadn't voted, so there's no official offer. I wanted an official offer, which we got, but they were talking. I've seen them talking, and I know there's a number of board members that have been modifying their budget. I think the problem on our side is when we do it, we're talking about laying somebody off.
Right.
Every option we have right now is going to cut somebody, where their modifications have been based on policy decisions about how much do they save towards something, which is very important too. I'm not going to discount that.
One thing they could do is offer an override. Now, that's the verboten word, right?
They discussed that too.
Yeah, that was discussed, and their board voted that down.
But as a town member, as a citizen of the town,
let them say that to us.
I would be against an override when another option is saving less. Why would we have an override when we're increasing savings? To me, that just doesn't make sense. So I think, I just don't think there's
we need more money, that's why.
But we only need more money if let's say this is your account at home, so you have a checking account, a savings account.
Yeah, I know about the checking account and savings account.
And I'm putting more money in savings, but then I say to my employer, well, I need more money over here, so give it to me so I can save more in my bank account. That's not...
Yeah, but you're going to say we need more money because we think the town wants free all-day kindergarten. We think the town likes class sizes like we've arranged. And we think the town does not want to get rid of teaching personnel and support personnel. So that's why we asked them for an override. True, it gets us closer to the upper reaches of Prop 2.5, but it's going to happen anyway.
Let's say the parking's 50 grand, and we say now that the board will be able to use that money for all expenses in regard to the parking. So the difference is 75,000. There is 75,000 on the town side of the budget if less money is saved towards OPED and capital to make this work. So an override in that situation just doesn't seem to make any sense to me, because there's money in the budget that we could use. It's not like now if both sides were cutting employees, that would be a whole different story. Then I wouldn't look at it that way. But I don't think an override will pass. Realistically, at the town meeting, I have no idea.
It'd be nice to find out, right? Do an empirical test. Poli-sci 101.
Do you think we need that big negative don't know, attitude towards the schools. That I think that will create a negative attitude towards the schools.
What, asking for an override?
Well, definitely that, yes.
Right, but I agree.
Fighting on town floor.
Not among parents.
No, but you're going to have parents against
Neighbors against neighbors,
Oh,
boards
come
against
on.
boards. But seriously, we're all in the same community, and I think...
We're not all in the same.
I've had,
There are some who are very well off and don't want to see any more money spent on schools, and some who want to see something done on schools.
I've
Okay.
had teachers that live in this town that have kids in our school district say to me they would not go for an override for
Okay,
this.
that's anecdotal.
I mean, I can tell you that I have
That's called
talked
anecdotal information. Okay.
with that. I mean, because they are also taxpayers in this community, and they would like to see us do what I think we're doing here tonight, which I think will make some people, see our budget in another light, because I don't know how many people have gone through our budget on a line by line and asked the question, why do we have a $2,000 increase here? Why do we have a $5,000 increase here? We've done that now, and I feel like,
we've done due diligence.
We've done a little bit more due diligence than we.
So,
Not that we didn't do it before, but we've now done it
Okay.
again.
And I thank you for your labor, seriously, I'm looking at it. But do you have a proposal to put forward?
I
A
don't-
motion
I
that
don't
we
have
could
a
begin to
motion.
discuss? Because it sounds to me like we're coming right back to where we were, admins looked at the budget and found a whole bunch of horrible options. And we still have a bunch of horrible options.
I mean, when you're at this point, and Russ, I agree with you. I don't agree with you on school choice, but when you're faced with keeping the money in an account and letting staff off, I think you're forced to consider it. How do you not, for one more year, put that decision off until FY18's budget? Who knows how things will break in FY18 for us? What changes may occur in tuitions, transportation, some of the costs we had to increase this year. That if we're faced with having to lay staff off compared to using, we've already done it. We've already done it with the other 3 accounts that we incorporated, early February. So if we're here trying to come up with some solution, I would say consider that as a portion of the 125 you need to get to.
School choice?
Yeah.
So
Because we don't have another option.
Well, your options are staffing. I really don't believe you can go to your supply lines, you can ask the principals, cut your discretionary money by 10%. We're talking about $40,000. But that's going to cut into the reams of paper they can buy, the pencils, the crayons, those type of...
and a lot of them are already
Yeah.
supplementing supplies with their own.
Well,
and that's
again,
not
but
fair.
to the point of the discussion, no matter what decision you make about cutting lines, it's going to have an impact.
Right,
You can
so-
use your choice money, it's not going to have an impact this year, it's going to put that decision in
Right.
FY18 budget discussion.
So, Tom, do you mind, again, running through what's in choice and what we have pending out of choice?
Well, again, I mean, it's an estimate because we won't
Right.
know our final numbers.
No,
But my
I know that.
projection is about 310,000. That will be an estimated ending balance.
And then what are we already funding out of school choice for next year?
Well, right now, the only line item we have is for staffing. We have classroom teachers at the high school for 5,000.
What?
Because next year's revenue, we'll get another 300,000 in revenue. The 310 is the estimated ending balance after our expenses and revenues in FY16. So for FY17's budget, we're anticipating about 300,000 in new revenue,
So
and
that
we
would be
appropriated that full amount.
Right, so we're still saying, we're starting with an account that has 310 in it. But right now, there is nothing specific that we are funding from that, with the exception of science or textbooks or those one-time expenses.
Maybe.
Yeah, no, it's been your contingency for, and the committee passed some guidelines years ago that had no lower than balance of 250. You will go against those guidelines, but again, you're also faced...
But we could revote those guidelines.
Yeah, you could, but...
Russ?
So, school choice, let's say we end at 310 this year, what's been the last, roughly, over the last few years? Are we trending down, trending up?
Yeah, we're down. We started the year with about 500,000. We added a number of expenses this year. There was some cost for a crossing guard. There was the superintendent search. There was a legal settlement. There were some other purchases. I forget. I'd have to go back.
So we had 500 last year. How about the year before?
I'd have to go back and look.
I mean, I'm used to seeing, millions of dollars in school choice in a lot of places. We don't have a big school choice program, but I know some schools in this area have $2-3 million in school choice. But they don't use it for this.
Do they want to share?
Projects or technology initiatives.
Yeah, 500 is usually about our top.
Bob and Peter.
So we kind of are stable. So the idea would be use 50 grand of the parking and another 75 out of school choice.
I think the parking is going to be a tough one to really to implement. I don't know that the town will really be able to come up with costs that are allocated to the high school parking lot that will be close to that amount. I think it's a good idea. I think we could look and work with them on how much they could really, maybe 10. Again, I don't know what other expenses they would have there. I don't know what it costs.
But whatever they can earmark that they can show that was a cost that they spent.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be hard because like plowing, how do you really pull that out?
But they do budget for something.
I think it's got to be something we present to them and say, and even if it's because what are we doing with the 48,000? It's just sitting in an account that we can't touch because that's something that they take care of, they maintain, because it's the outside of the building.
And we hope for a really snowy winter next winter.
Right. So, I mean, even
snow
if it's the 48,000 and they bill us over 3 years,
Well, I would say really every year. I mean, realistically, as long as I was on the committee, if we have this account and it's really costs they incur, then why wouldn't we allow them to use the money?
Right. I think, and do we have to create a policy for this? Like, how do we make this? Because I feel like we've got this money and it's sitting there. We should, and the town clearly has a need. Why aren't we reallocating it towards them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the history was back in the day, they had to expand the parking lot to accommodate the number of staff and students. So they used money from the parking fee to help pave a new area of the lot, which used to exist actually right in this area, if I recall correctly. So that was how they were able to fund it back in the day. But that was when the maintenance and grounds were under the school department. So the staffing and the costs were part of the school budget. Since the consolidation back in '07 or so, that shifted. But the money has been in this fund because it accrued over those years.
So what if we maybe could get 25?
So the other thing that we've just started to do kind of is comb through the special education lines for next year and this year to see if there are places there that we can, but we're really just digging into the process now, and based on preliminary, there might be some reduction, but not a ton.
But
we're working on it. We're working on it, but I don't know. And again, it's fluid. It's special ed.
Yeah, what you shared with us at our last finance sub-meeting, we're also in the negative this year for special ed because of some unexpected.
Which will then be transferred.
Which will be transferred. And we're not just negative $10,000, $20,000. Like, this is a significant amount, and I don't know if you're going to be talking about it later, but when we think about that, the idea of you can't cut $200,000 out of special education.
No, I wasn't thinking that high, but if we're looking for every possible thing that we can find to make a good best faith effort, and like, okay, we dug through everything, just I want you to know that that's going on.
Which would potentially reduce how much we take out of school choice ultimately.
Yes, so we'll have a, right.
And when will that combing be?
Well, it would be good to do it with the new PS director, so going forward they would have some idea of how we do that, but we meet once a week on Tuesdays, so we're going to get all of us together, so we're started, and I'm going through the lines with the assistant here too, so I'd say another couple of weeks probably.
So, if I can just interject for one minute, I guess in Janet's absence, we've been talking about this for about 3 hours, and it is no doubt probably the most important conversation we can have. But it also feels to me like we're kind of going in circles around some of these issues. And so I think that Liz has a proposal that she'd like to make.
Yes, okay.
So
why don't we try to offer the parking money and then split the cost of what we have left of the 125. We do our school choice, so it's about 37,000, and we'll see if they will pick up the other
Pull another
37,000.
37 out of school choice?
We'll give them the 50 from the parking, propose
48.
it, whatever.
Propose it.
And then
Reallocate.
we have left 70,
But it's not 50 because, I don't.
It's
well-
48, so let's
Well, it's
get the
48,
numbers.
but they have to be spending 48 on that parking lot.
Does it have to
I
be
don't know
specifically
how-
that parking lot, or can
Yeah.
it be
Yeah,
any
it
of our
does,
parking
but-
lots?
I asked that question.
But that's the
Dan asked that
amount,
question,
but
so-
that's
I
the
must have
amount of
zoned out.
money. So
okay.
that's what we have, so we
Right.
reallocate the
And then,
48,000.
then there's 77,000 left from the 125, so we divide that by 2, and it's 38.5. So we take 38.5 out of school choice and see if they'll take 38.5 out of OPED to meet in the middle.
Right.
It's an offer.
So I guess my sort
Okay,
of
second.
Okay, great.
Should we second it?
Is that a motion?
No, it's a suggestion.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I guess, I
Well,
don't
it
know.
probably makes sense to make it a motion.
I'm just so tired.
Should you make
Why
it
don't you make it a motion, Liz?
Okay, I make it a motion.
That way we can move into, I'll second, and then we can move into discussion.
So my question to Tom was, how much would you feel comfortable saying we could take from school choice? You know, 50? I mean, obviously, it's not fiscally sound to be, but at the same time, if we're talking about staff cuts or, buying ourselves some time.
So keeping in mind that school choice is we're paying for $20,000 in building maintenance, right?
That's coming out of building rental.
Okay.
We did not
But
tap
we do
into.
potentially have the preschool playground.
I suggest you hold on that. We have not had parental concern. They have roped off when the preschool goes out there. I think you go back again to, what group do we ask that of?
CPC?
Yeah.
CPC,
For
and
next year.
hold off on that. That would give you a little bit more flex with school choice.
And then the other items we were going to fund out of it were the geometry textbooks, which were $35,000, and the elementary science, which is $100,000. So that's 135. So it's 310 minus 135.
Well, I never planned on funding any of those things. I think
That's what- I'm
they
sorry.
were going to be brought forward as needs and discussion from the committee as to how you wanted to proceed. They have been identified as instructional curriculum that are needed in the district, but we do not have a funding source identified at this time.
And we also have a potential shortfall as well for FY16.
We're monitoring that very closely.
I mean, we're clearly, the problem with our budget is we've gotten to the point where every time we have to cut, it's cutting a position. Because, I mean, we cut an extra 10 grand in PD and tech, but that doesn't, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars one way or the other, so we're never going to be able to use those type of items to do this. I mean, the next few years at least, it looks like we're just going to be cutting positions.
But I guess realistically, Tom, when we're doing, when Liz is doing the math of, coming to splitting that amount, that's assuming that there's 48,000 of billable expenses for parking lot maintenance for this year.
It would become an issue the town would have to look at to identify expenses that.
Right, so we would have to wait to hear back from them.
They may be creative in how they figure out
Assess
to
that.
assess those
But it's not-
expenditures.
I would say it's not only that, though. I mean, part of this is just trying to operate in good faith, and I think if they know they have that money there, then this year they can budget a little differently, and every year thereafter, because this isn't, I think at least as long as we're all on the same page with this, if we all believe that parking money, if they ask, we should give them the money that it costs to go towards, maintenance of the parking lot. So basically what we're saying is all the money in that account will go to the town at some point, whether it's all this year or next year. I mean, it's,
How much do we bring in every year for that?
Well, since we reduced it last year, it's about $5,500 or so.
cost more than that to take care of that parking lot? Depends on the.
Yeah, I mean, I believe there was a monitor at one point. I don't know if there's still a monitor that was helping with traffic flow, so.
In the morning?
Yeah. I
There's a
mean,
crossing person.
Yeah, call it monitor, but.
Oh, so do we pay that person separately, or does the
They
town
do.
pay that person? Oh, so that salary could come out of the
I
48,000?
think that would be an option they could consider, yes.
That's for the cars that are coming in and out, basically, so.
It's a great idea.
All right, so there's a motion on the,
Ask Tom your question.
So did you have an answer for that, like?
The school choice?
What am I comfortable with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm
It goes
just.
against best business practices, but, I mean, again, if I were faced with the choice of using my reserves or cutting a position, I would use it. I would
Right.
put off that position of elimination as long as I possibly can.
Right.
You know, so I think up to 50, I think I would be comfortable with.
So,
I wouldn't be comfortable, but I think in light of having to save a position,
yep.
I think it's a reasonable decision.
So we have the 50 from the parking fee and the 48 from the parking fee, and then the 50 from, brings us to 100. Do we, you know, is that?
50.
Well, Liz's proposal is 38.5 from school choice.
Got it.
right, dividing the 77 remainder and asking the town to split with us. That's the proposal. All right, so any further discussion?
On the 38.5 plus parking.
Parking fund, that we agreed to reallocate the parking fund balance in full, which is approximately 48,000, and that the difference between that and the 125 would then be split equally between school committee and select board.
Well, we'll ask them to.
Why don't we just say 50? And is that based on, just to show,
Good faith.
yeah, that we're giving everything that we can possibly give up, and so if that's another $12,000, let's.
Wait, what did we, I'm sorry.
I guess I'm suggesting we amend it to 50,000 from school choice, and the parking fee 48K. I don't know, Liz, what do you think about that?
I'd say yeah, but I think we're kind of negotiating, so don't know where we're gonna
Yeah.
go from here.
I don't know. I mean, it's, I think at this point, the amount of money we're talking about, it's really just a question of can we build a consensus by being reasonable to get to, kindergarten's got to go into the budget at some point, whether it's this year or next year, it's going to happen. It makes a lot more sense to do it this year, so we get to 100 grand the following year. If we're only 25,000 apart, you know.
Yeah, but we have some special ed costs extra this year that we will have to
We
pay
have
out of
some significant
school choice. So we can't really deplete it that much. So I think we should just start and try to see if they'll split it.
I guess my concern is that they can't use that whole 48,000, so, you know, then.
We'll let them decide that.
I have no idea, but landscaping and plowing, because all the landscaping around there, I don't know how much that would add up to. It must be
But, and like
significant.
Tom said,
They've
the
taken care of the landscaping in a year.
Well, the
the
thing is,
crossing,
they could actually hire
assistance.
someone to take
Buying
care
a
of
new
the
plow.
landscaping for the year.
Remember, it's got to be existing line items that they can reduce in order to make this work. They have to be able to reduce an existing appropriation without having to increase expenses on their side. They want to be able to cut a line item on their budget that any expenses they incur could now be charged to this.
so
line on our
realistically,
side.
knowing how you have worked with the town and Paul Pusterzik and the budget, do you see that there could be creative ways of allocating the entire 48,000 in 1 year?
I can't answer that. I would have to sit and talk to Paul, because I don't know their budget that detailed, so I can't give you an answer.
Well, and beyond that, though, I think, you know, it's not going to be 48 every year, so that's like giving them one-time money if they're going to use all the
Right.
48,000. So that's where I'm saying let's give a little bit more from our free cash, because I think realistically, well, we know they can't get 48,000 every year. from us, so.
It sounds like we're all doing a lot of one-time stuff. The town,
Right.
us.
We've literally fought against every year for the last 6 years, doing one-time things, but
All right, so there's a motion on the table. Any further discussion?
The motion's for the 38.5?
I'll say I lean towards 50 as well.
Okay, so are we amending the motion? Because the motion right now is for the parking fund in its entirety and then dividing the remainder equally between school committee and select board, is what we're offering.
So I guess I'll make an amendment that we
You
use
wanna-
50,000 on school choice.
So your amendment is that it's 48,000 or the balance of the parking fund,
Mm-hmm.
and 50,000 school choice, asking the select board to fund the remainder.
Second.
Can I ask, what do we do?
Well, I just want to be clear. So the
Okay.
expectation would be the appropriation we requested that the school committee approved would basically be reduced by about 27,000. Because you're going to put 50 up, right?
you're gonna put.
And then
48.
We're going to put, and then the 48.
So right, you're asking the town to give you another.
27,000 than what they've already said they would give us.
Okay.
I have some reservations about this approach. Especially given just sort of the large amount of one-time funding that's already contributing to our increase, or that's making up parts of our increase. I am okay with, making the one-time reductions. I'm okay with, budgeting based on expected revenues from the state to backfill some of that Chapter 70. But I do have some concerns about, crossing a line where we've now built a budget based on about almost $200,000 worth of non-recurring revenues, because that's just distance we have to make up next year. And that's not a position that I think we want to be in. I don't think we want to be at this table again next year having the same conversation and wondering where all our money went.
So you're, the 50,000 from school choice as well as the 102 that we did before?
Well, you're gonna budget for operational costs based on one-time funds, and that's fine. I mean, it's fine to use that money for things that cost us that are expenses one time. But if we're gonna be funding something like a kindergarten program or retain staff at a middle school, I don't think that that's a viable source of revenue for us to use, or a viable source of funds for us to use. I mean, I don't want to be here next year facing just as large of a deficit, if not larger. It'll be larger. It'll be larger because we're putting like $200,000 worth of one-time funds, and I know that we're trying to close a hole, and I know we're trying to be creative in how we do it. And I think that that's obviously a necessary function of the conversation we've been having for the last 3 hours. But before we go ahead and make this take a vote to move forward in this way, I think we need to think about those implications down the road. This is not a smart idea. As much as it accomplishes what we want to accomplish, this is not the way that we want to accomplish it, in my opinion. If we're going to try to plug this hole and we're going to try to make compromises, or we're going to go to town meeting, we can't do it based on one-time revenues. We've already budgeted too many of them. I have very serious reservations. I don't have a solution right now. I'm just going to say that I don't know what the right answer to this is, and the right answer may be that we have to, make a decision internally that is not what we originally voted, or the right decision is we have to go and try to find that money at town meeting. But I just don't think that I can support this in good faith, knowing that next year we're going to be up against larger COLAs because of our negotiated contracts, larger steps, larger lane changes, larger expenses, and smaller revenues from the town.
Not larger. They're still 1.5%.
Sure.
I
Well,
just want to make.
Is it 1.5 again next year? Yeah.
Two.
Oh,
It's
is it
2,
two?
so we're going
Okay.
up 0.5. I mean, this
That's
is,
the third year next
we're,
year?
we're setting ourselves up for a scenario that we are going to be we're digging ourselves into a hole. I mean, we're basically putting an entire kindergarten program on a credit card. That's what we're doing. And that is not how we've done business historically. It's not how we should start doing business now. I just, yeah.
Tom, can I ask you a question? 48,000 is in parking.
Yes.
Where did that come from?
So it came from fees that were collected from students, and again, a majority of that was there.
This year?
No, a majority of that was there prior to FY09. So it had built up over some years. Over the last 2 years, we've collected about another $11,000.
Okay. And in this proposal, we're going to give that 48,000 to the select board.
It will be available for the town to charge expenses to for parking lot-related expenses, yes.
So that is going to shrink it to, could go down to 0.
Could go down to 0, yes.
And we continue to ask students to pay fees?
We are charging a fee for students.
It's like $25.
35, I think.
No, I don't care for that idea.
But responding to Michael, you would hold off on the Williams cut for 1 year, and then the enrollment goes from 236 down to 211. So that would be your
Is that your
150 to 200,000 there. You could cut 4 positions at that point, and the class size will come down substantially.
No, because you'd have to wait another year.
4th grade's at 208 right now.
7th grade. No, because
So
you'd have to
7th
keep
grade
them
would
for
go
their
to
8th
6th
grade.
grade.
Because
No, I'm pretty sure they said 1 more year.
No, because it's your current,
It's your current 6th grade is really
it's your
high.
current 6th grade is big, so it's 2
It's
years.
2 more years.
2 years.
But next year is not worse than this coming year. The year after this coming year
Right.
is not worse.
But what is worse than this year is, and all we've been hearing from the select board is that next year is going to be even tighter.
Well,
And that's
that's the
concerning.
reason that we don't roll it out. Like, we should try for this year, because I don't feel like a rolled out approach is going to.
Right.
We had $200,000 in increases that just popped up on us this year that we didn't even know would happen, the transportation and something else.
But if we go forward with the plan that's on the table right now and the motion that's on the table, if we do get an unexpected placement, or if we do get an unexpected increase in transportation costs, we're cutting into our ability to fund those
We do.
anomalies in our budget that pop up.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, but go ahead, Russ. I know you're your hand up.
Who are you texting to, Janet? 'Cause-
My husband, who's asking when I'm going to be home.
okay.
Not anytime soon.
Is that acceptable?
I was raising my hand for a while. I was waiting for you to call me, but so the one-time cost is 50 grand
Go ahead.
for this year. 50,000 out of school choice. I think the middle school issue is probably going to come up again next year, unfortunately. The other monies that were one-time costs, the town has indicated that if the utilities are off, that they're going to supplement on our side, correct?
Yeah, I think what was being referred to was we did 20,000 in circuit breaker, we did 20,000 in building rental, and 10,000 in preschool. So those are what I would say are not going to be available to us in FY18 budget.
Okay, so we got the 50 and 50, which is basically 100 grand
I
in
need to try and wrap it up.
total, one time.
Can I just suggest, in the interest of time, because the lights are going to go off in an hour, and we still have an agenda, that we continue this conversation, that we table the motion, and that we we finish this conversation in either another scheduled meeting or we schedule another meeting to finish this conversation. I just think that we need a little bit more time to understand the full implications of what's being discussed here in terms of the one-time monies, and we need a little bit more time to come up with alternative solutions to this $125,000 question.
Yes, Mark?
Janet, and I apologize for breaking in, but just from a logistics point of view, the budget needs to go to the printer
I
this week,
understand.
and it will get printed the way it is unless there's a change. So
Yeah.
I understand.
But my only point, Michael, is that it's going to show up and there's going to be need to be an amendment on town meeting floor.
Right. No, and that's a point well taken. My response is just that we've historically have done that, you know.
I
Can we-
appreciate you discussing it, I'm just
Yeah.
making
No,
sure
it's well
everybody's
taken. I
aware.
appreciate that.
Can we look at tabling some of the other stuff on our agenda and keep with this budget discussion? Because that's probably the most time sensitive of everything, and then try to have a meeting at a later date for the other things.
I just don't know what we're going to come up with in this meeting without having, you know, further time to review that we haven't already kind of come across. I'm not opposed to, you know, continuing this discussion for the next hour or until the lights go off. But I think that we need a better opportunity to understand if we're going to make an amendment on the floor, where that's going to, I mean, what other parts of the budget that's going to come from. I think we need a better opportunity to fully understand the implications of taking funds from, you know, from revolving accounts and stabilization, or, you know, internal sort of one-time funds. I think that we have to kind of have a little bit more of a fleshed out conversation, and unfortunately, I'm not prepared to do that right now just because this is something that popped up in the last 15, 20 minutes. And, you know, I agree with you, and I understand the timeliness, you know, that Mark just raised, but I think that we kind of owe it to ourselves and owe it to the community to continue to have a thorough conversation about this issue.
I mean, we can schedule a meeting for Thursday evening.
That's tough for me.
Well, yeah, and the board has to meet again to talk about whatever we do.
Well, the select board has a meeting scheduled tomorrow, and then the town finance meeting has a meeting scheduled on Wednesday. And I can tell you both of the subjects, it's our budget, so.
So in my opinion, if we could come up with the other 50, hope the board agrees with us, hope the finance committee can allow this to go forward with the recommendation, and then, you know, I think we got to continue looking at the special ed accounts and seeing if we can come up with some more money. But the only new thing today, the parking fees we're not using anyway, so it's really 50 grand. 50 grand out of the size budget we have. Next year, if things are tight, we're going to have to find a way to deal with it. But I don't think 50 grand is going to, you know, I don't think that's going to make a huge difference. It's the same thing I told to the Board of Selectmen over the 7,000 OPEB and the capital. Those numbers, when we're talking about budgets that, you know, our size, are, you know, it's like me saving an extra couple bucks. I mean, it doesn't make any difference at all.
But you're really talking about closer to 150, 160 grand when you talk about the two one-time concessions that we took in our budget, the two reductions.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, we're not just talking about 50 grand, we're talking about much more than that, and the more one-time monies that we use to fund our programs this year, the higher that number is going to be next year.
Yeah. Oh, I think you're definitely correct that next year is going to be very tight. It's going to be a tough year, no question. But I think if the three entities can't come up with a number that works and go to town meeting together, I think that's going to be damaging for a whole bunch of reasons, not just the financial. So I'd be willing to risk the 50 grand and send the parking monies over and whatever number they can use. And hopefully that's enough for them. If it's not, then we're in a whole different circumstance. But I think we need to compromise. I think the board has compromised, and I think they've done so in good faith. I've never, it's a question of priorities. I don't think that, you know, I would have different priorities, and obviously they say the same to me. I don't think that's bad faith. I just think it's different priorities. But I do think on our side, we need to come up with some money. Now, hopefully it's not 50 grand out of school choice. Hopefully we get that money from somewhere else. But if we can't, I'd be willing to do it. And then next year, if it comes to this situation, and, you know, hopefully on the town side, they don't have the insurance increase they had this year. It was a large increase. Maybe that shouldn't happen again next year, hopefully. But if we're in this situation again next year, at least we have kindergarten in the budget. We're getting an extra 100 grand, and then we're going to have to make some tough choices, most likely. But I think this issue has to be put to bed because it can't be a recurring issue every year.
I agree with that.
I think when we talk about, taking money from school choice, I think we do have to be a little leery because we do have some very significant shortfalls right now on the special education side that we would typically fund out of that. And they're not 10,000 or 20,000. And I don't know if we're at a point, we don't know exactly how much they are, but we could be using the entire amount of school choice.
But could those costs not be requested in fall town meeting from?
Well, that's what I'm sorry, that's where I was going to go earlier in this conversation. I forgot. It's kind of going all over the place. What do we do if we end the year in FY16 with a $300,000 deficit because of some unexpected costs? Like, I don't know what happens. I haven't.
Has a heart
Go to the
attack.
fall town meeting and you make up the difference.
Right.
You go to fall town meeting?
With whatever free cash there may be, or
I think she's asking about this. Are you talking about 16?
It's like FY16.
Yeah.
you don't know that until July 1st.
Right.
So you go to the fall town meeting. That's what we do.
Right. That's why we have it.
And I think Tom might have a heart attack.
Well, yeah,
We
I
haven't
don't.
had to do that in a long
Yeah, we
time,
haven't had to
so-
do that. Normally, we try to project a deficit by the Springtown meeting if we know in the past the town has supported special ed tuitions that have come up that were unbudgeted and have been supported. So we've gone back to the town, I think 2010 was the last time we had to do that. But we work very diligently not to have something occur that would put us in a deficit of that magnitude. And again, the things that we talked about at Finance Sub wouldn't account to that type of tuition this year, because we only have 4 months left in the year and they're not even placed yet. So the
Okay, so it
ramification
would
is
be for
more into
next year.
FY17.
Because we do have some potential increases for FY17 that
We do.
are,
John?
okay.
I think we should vote down this proposal that's currently the motion before us and end this discussion and send the select board home and ourselves home and the audience with this message. We're ready to go to town floor and let the voters vote on this. That's our position.
Well,
That's how
So
I
I'm
feel
okay to
about it.
table the discussion, I'm not okay to have the little bit afterwards that I want to go to town floor.
Well, isn't that the implication if we table it?
No, because we can table it until our next
But-
meeting, we can table it until Thursday, we can table it until,
Yeah,
I just don't see on the other side them coming anywhere near where we're going, okay? I'm sorry.
They have 2 meetings coming up. Another way to do this is, we've talked about a potential compromise. If they have their meetings and they decide that potential compromise might work, they could let us know that. By then, maybe we have the information from Sue as far as what our potential areas we can save, or
she said 2 to 3 weeks. She didn't say 2 or 3 days. You didn't say 2 or 3 hours.
we're shortening your timeline. No, I'm talking our next meeting,
Okay.
But
which is
Russ,
a couple
I
weeks
think,
away.
in fairness, we wouldn't vote on anything at our last
Right.
meeting. We had the discussion, but wouldn't come to a decision because it wasn't an official offer. I could see the select board saying the same thing, is this isn't an official offer. It's kind of testing the waters of, hey, we'll float this out there and see how you feel about it.
Right, and I had a
because we
particular
can't
strong opinion about
keep
that.
having, because of time and whatever else. So I just wanted to bring that up out of fairness.
So, in my opinion, and I understand this is just my opinion, I don't see necessarily a very large issue with having a number that does not match what's printed in the warrant at town meeting. I've been to many a town meeting where the number read by the member of the select board who reads the budget does not match the number printed in the warrant. There has been several occasions in which that has been noted to the community in the motion made. I understand that it's nice to have sort of a coherent vision of what the budget's going to look like printed in the warrant. I completely understand that, and I'm supportive of that. But we're not in a position to be able to kind of make that up at this point, and to match that up. So, I move that we table this discussion to allow the committee more time to be able to evaluate the implications of the motion on the table.
But before
And it's not debatable because that's Robert's rules.
What?
A motion to table.
Close for an immediate vote. Is that it?
Yeah, but you need a 2/3 vote for a motion to table.
Yeah, well.
All right,
Need
so
a second
calling
on
for a
it?
vote to table the discussion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table the vote for further discussion.
Well, so are we in discussion now?
No, it's not
We have to
debatable.
vote. Do you wish to table the discussion? You would vote yes. If you're not in favor to table the discussion, you would vote no. All those in favor to table the discussion?
I mean, we're going to table it until
Until our next meeting.
Next meeting?
Yeah.
Well, but, and that's what I wanted to get out before you made your flippin' motion, is we keep pushing things off to our next meeting, our next meeting, our next meeting. Our next meeting is interviewing for pupil services and other agenda items that we've moved from other meetings to then. So
Right.
I would suggest that we would have to have another meeting,
I'm fine with that.
which the soonest would be Thursday or,
We're violating Robert's rules.
Right, can we-
Vote.
okay, so all those in favor of
We'll do that
tabling the
2/3.
discussion?
I think I've got, I don't know if I got.
Do I get to say why I'm voting in the way
No.
that I am?
No.
Nothing.
That's okay.
So all those in favor
Tabling.
of tabling the discussion?
I thought we just voted on that.
No. All those opposed?
Okay.
Okay.
So,
What does that mean?
We're back to my amendment.
We're back to the amendment.
so on that amendment, I guess what I would like to do is give something official to the select board so they can discuss it, so that, like, there's something on the table, and whether it be that we say we are officially offering this as an option, we would not take, $98,000 off of our budget, but we're suggesting these two ideas, the 48 from the parking fund only, and the 50 from the free cash only, and let the finance committee, discuss it, and the select board discuss it, and see what they think in terms of that. That would be, if they don't think it's a sound fiscal decision, we can't take it from anywhere else. I guess I'm not saying we'll cut $98,000. I'm saying, what if we somehow, whether it be by a vote or we make an official.
So would it be acceptable to this committee, since we have the chairs of both, to ask if that's acceptable to them for their discussions at their next two meetings?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Richard, for tomorrow?
I can't speak for the board, but we are having the meetings tomorrow.
Right. But would this soft offer be enough of an offer for discussion?
As far as I'm concerned, I will take it to the board.
Okay. Jim?
I will report it, but I will report it that it's a soft vote and it doesn't mean anything
Okay.
to our deliberations, really.
Okay.
But the amendment right now is to make an offer of 50,000 for school choice, and the parking but the parking amounts would be able to be used by the town, whatever amount they can come up with.
Right. So that's the amendment that we need to vote on. So are we ready to vote on the amendment?
Is Michael, when you say 150 out of one-time type costs, are you including the 102 that we originally cut?
Yep.
But that's really 100 total. I mean, that's what we just went through. It's 50 from school choice and 50 out of that 100, right?
Well, there's
I mean, that's-
50 out of utilities, and then there's 52 out of
Other
various
funds.
things that we took.
Yeah, but that's money that's no longer in our base.
Right, well, we saw that one line item, the custodial fees. We took $20,000 out of school choice to reduce that line item for this year, but next year it's going to go back up to $62,000 like it has been for the last 4 years.
Yes.
It's really 100.
All right, so are we ready to vote on the amendment? All right, so the amendment again is to offer Diane, tell me if I have this right, to offer the 48,000 or full balance of the parking fund plus 50,000 from school choice, with asking the select board to fund the remaining 27,000 plus or minus, whatever that is. All right, so all those in favor? Opposed?
Is this the soft offer or no?
This is the amendment.
The real offer.
So we're just voting on the amendment right now, to accept the amendment. We have not voted on
The amendment to go from
The offer.
38,000 to 50,000. Oh,
Right.
You know what,
40.
what.
I thought, okay, never mind, go ahead.
All right, so now the motion is
Well, what was the vote? I didn't see everybody's hand.
4 to 3.
4 to 3. It's 4.
In favor?
4 in favor, 3 opposed.
Okay.
So now the motion is what we just read, which is taking 48, offering
48 parking.
Right, offering the select board that we will give them the balance of the parking fund, 48,000 or whatever the balance is, plus 50,000 from school choice, asking them to fund the remaining balance of 27,000 or whatever that is, once the total of, Mark?
Jan, I just wanted to make just a quick clarification.
Sure.
I started out this evening by saying that the school committee's request was $33,203,609. So am I understanding that what you're voting on now is, because this is the only number that matters at town meeting. And I appreciate your discussions about internal, but the only thing town meeting needs is this number. So that you're now voting to amend that to $33,153,609, and asking the school and asking the select board to reduce their, whether it's snow removal or whatever budgets and some other thing, by $48,000 and access that $48,000 by sending the bills to Tom Mazza.
Yes.
Essentially.
Right, and so the difference,
Well, then the select board would need to balance the budget.
right, so the
But the only
difference,
thing you're asking for is $33,153,609 to be funded from general funds revenue.
Could you give me that number
What
one
was
more
the
time,
first
Mark? I
number?
didn't hear you.
$33,153,609.
which number was
What was the
Based
first
on the
number?
budget that we originally had.
609.
The request was $33,203,000, right, 609, and it's gotten adjusted
Okay.
by $50,000 less.
I would agree, because the only thing the school committee is doing is shifting 50,000 from their general fund to school choice. The rest of our lines would stay the same. The town would then have to figure out on their side how they're handling the 48,000, wherever they're going to reduce their lines from, that could then be charged to the parking fund or fee, and the 27, however they want to address it.
Right.
So I would concur that the change in our budget is a reduction in the general fund of 50,000. Our bottom line doesn't actually change. It's
Right.
what we did
the
earlier with the
general fund.
52,000. We just moved it from one funding source to another. So yes, I
Thanks.
So
concur.
at 33,203,609, it goes down to, if we subtract 98,000, it
We
goes
don't
down.
subtract 98, we subtract 50.
From the
And they have
general
to-
fund.
Ah, okay.
And their
that's
side
why.
would really be then reduced by the 75,000. That would be the parking and the
Yeah.
27,000 difference, but they would have to figure out however they want to handle that, where they would make the adjustment
Okay.
in their lines.
Right. So does that make sense for the motion, Diane? All right, so are we ready to vote on the motion?
Sure.
All right, so all those in favor of the 48,000 or balance from parking fees, 50,000 in free cash, remainder, school choice, I'm sorry, remainder of 27,000 for the select board, which then increases our
I would just
bottom
read
line
that number.
by the 50,000
You talking the general fund?
general fund.
Yeah.
It makes our ask.
Decreases it by
Increases.
50,000 and increase school choice by 50,000.
Right. All right, so all those in favor? All those opposed? Okay.
Does it pass?
It's 4-3, right, Diane? Is that what it was? I didn't see Michelle's hand. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
I was over.
All right.
Who were the three? Those three?
Yeah, this corner.
So, Richard, and Jim,
Minority corner.
that offer's on the table. For you to take to your meetings this week. Okay? All right.
Can I just ask, you were opposed because it's one-time money? And Liz and John, were you the same type of opposed?
I'm opposed because I want to shoot out on the town floor.
Okay,
I'm opposed because I don't think we should offer that much money.
okay. Just checking. I just wanted.
And just for the record, I'm not opposed to a compromise.
Right.
And I'm just, being conscientious about how we're funding our budget.
No, I agree.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you said, and I guess I wish I had a little more time to think about it, but I think for the sake of time for them, I wanted to.
I think that this is the first year since 2010 that we will be at Fall Town Meeting asking for more money for this year.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not, but.
Hopefully not, but
Well, I think, yeah, I share your concern, Michael, but I think we need to work real hard amongst all of us to figure out how we can avoid using the 50 from
Yeah.
school choice. But I want to give the board an opportunity to actually talk about it tomorrow.
Sure.
All right, so, moving right along.
Jen, one more thing on this discussion, just
On the
throw it
budget?
out there. Yep, but it's very quick. I know we have 3 to 4 teachers that are wondering whether or not they have a job here next year at Williams. So is there any way to, I know that I am not comfortable cutting those teachers. Can I make a motion to take off the table cutting the middle school teachers so that they don't go and look for other jobs and we don't have those teachers? I feel like if it were my livelihood at stake and I were watching these meetings wondering what's happening, it would be really upsetting to have to think about it until June or whenever. So,
All right, so
it
there's
seemed like there was.
You want to make a motion?
Sure, I would like to make a motion to maintain the staff at Williams Middle School.
Is there a second?
I'm sorry.
There's a motion on the table to maintain the team at Williams Middle School so that the teachers know that they have a job next year. Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. While I appreciate that, Michelle, I don't know that we can promise that because we don't know what's going to happen on town floor to our budget. We don't know what's going to happen with the select board's meeting tomorrow night. We're not going to know we can't predict what's going to happen with finance. We don't know what's going to happen on town floor. So if we motion to ensure their positions, then we are committing ourselves to
It kind of ties
charging
kindergarten
It kind of ties our
tuition.
hands
Yeah.
before we have a chance to make adjustments if we're not able to reach a point of consensus with the board of selectmen. And I agree with Janet. I appreciate where the spirit of that motion, and I appreciate sort of the desire to, provide some, I guess, some relief or calm some nerves of some teachers. It's obviously not fun for them, and it's not fun any year when we're in this position. It's unfortunately the nature of municipal budgeting that we have some unsureties until, we get a budget passed. But, I'd like to be able to do that, and I'd like to be able to say to them that everything's fine. But I think we can't make that commitment today. And if we can reach a point of agreement with them in the next couple days or by our next meeting, I think that we can certainly have that motion, as just to reassure them. But today, I don't think we can.
What's the layoff deadline? Is there one in the contract, or is it just?
June 15th, 2 weeks after town meeting.
Just June 15th. So
let's say that, we aren't able to find a compromise and we go to town meeting